Sergeant at Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President,
All right, Senators, on this somewhat cloudy and rainy April 2nd, we are very pleased to have the Reverend J.C. Austin of Woods Memorial Presbyterian Church in Severna, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 33rd District. Please rise for the invocation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you are the source of all wisdom, goodness, justice, and peace. We gather this day as representatives of a great and diverse state made up of many different kinds of people, each one bearing the dignity of your creation and love, each one holding the hopes and burdens of those who sent them here. We ask in this moment before the work of this body begins that you fill us with your spirit of discernment and peace, dampen the noise of division and the pull of ambition, and open us to one another in the work before us, to the possibility that the person across the aisle carries a piece of truth that we have not yet seen, and a concern for the well-being of our neighbors that we share more deeply than our differences suggest. Grant to these legislators the discernment and courage to work together for the people of Maryland, and especially those who are most in need, the child in poverty, the elder without care, the family stretched beyond its limits, the one at the margins wondering if anyone sees them. Make these halls a place where collaboration is counted as strength, and where working together for the common good is counted as victory. And grant that the work that is done this day and the impact of it in the days ahead may reflect your love and care for each of us and all of us. We ask and trust you to hear and respond to this, our prayer this day. Amen.
Recognize the senator from the 33rd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to welcome back Reverend Austin from Woods Memorial Presbyterian Church in Severna Park, Maryland. Woods, in addition to its ministry, does a lot for the Severna Park community, operating a really wonderful preschool, including hosting scouts, troops, and more. And it's just a pleasure to have Reverend Austin back with us again this session. So thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask his words be journalized.
Thank you, Senator, and without objection, we certainly will journalize the wonderful invocation this morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us again. All right, has everyone recorded their presence? Close. All right, the clerk will take the call. With 41 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is again back in session. Don't believe we have any resolutions today. Let's do guest star with the senator from the 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I can, I'd just like to announce my interns.
Please.
Mr. President, these three young people, young scholars, best and brightest of the 45th, have been with us. Zaire Hill, University of Maryland College Park; Jordan Wolford, Morgan State University; Gregory Barr, Stevenson University. Mr. President, I know that our interns come here to get the experience, but I tell you, I'm always the one that learns. I feel like I'm younger. I feel like I know a little bit more simply by spending experience around them. So I just say thank you, thank you, thank you for not just pouring into me, but being able to see how our government works up close and personal. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome. We could all use feeling a little younger these days, you know. Yes, recognize the senator from the 33rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have with me today my fellow, Ronald R.J. Hughes. R.J. is a graduate of West Point, graduating in 1999 and commissioning as an engineer officer. He served 26 years active duty in the U.S. Army, retiring as a colonel. He's currently working on his master's in social work at the University of Maryland. He's just been a wonderful addition to my office, helping us on lots of issues, including Anne Arundel County delegation matters, and it's a pleasure to have him here with us today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us. Senator from the 28th.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I have today is a shadow. It's a Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland 2026 fellow, Mr. Jeremy Reed. He is now a MBA candidate at Howard University School of Business, whose work spans business strategy, communication, community development, and public policy. He's a South Louisiana native. He earned his undergraduate degree from the mighty Louisiana State University. And didn't tell you this, my wife is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
That's right. Go Tigers.
He's focusing on the intersection of business and public policy. His work is grounded in advancing impact-driven solutions that connect economic growth with equitable access and opportunity. His major points of focus to address systematic inequities that are expanding economic mobility and strengthening pathways to local ownership in underserved communities. One word he would use to describe his fellowship with the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland this session is pivotal. So thank you for being here. And thank you, Mr. President.
Welcome. Thank you for your work. We hope that you are learning a great deal from our wonderful legislature. Senator from the 22nd, followed by the Senator from Montgomery County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, if you can help me in welcoming Mr. Samadhi Scott. He's a 9th grader at Annapolis High School. His aunt is a very close constituent of mine in Greenbelt who called me last week and asked me if he can be my shadow today. What I learned from him today, Mr. President, was that this young man is an author of a book that he wrote, and it's called the Serial Series. He created this when he was in the 5th grade, and it was publicized when he was in the 5th grade. And now he's in the 9th grade, and he hopes to become more of a published author as well and continue writing skills. So
Excellent.
I want to congratulate him and welcome him to Annapolis.
Very good. Welcome, welcome. Keep up the great work. Have to stop by the senator from the 45th's office. He's our resident author here that can give you some tips on that book. So, all right. Let's see. Senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Some of you know my sister is autistic, and she's very kind to allow me to talk about her and her lived experience. Today is World Autism Acceptance Day, and we have a number of folks in the gallery celebrating today with us. If they could stand up, and if you could welcome them here to the Senate, please.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for being with us. We appreciate you. Yes, Senator from the Capital City.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have a student shadowing me today, Mr. Jonah Benet. Jonah is a student at George Washington University, but he's a proud resident of District 30. He's interested in civic engagement and in constructive political discussion. So thank you for joining us, Jonah. Thank you.
Very good. Welcome. Let's see, any further introductions? If not, so we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We have a pretty full day today. We'll see how far we get, and we'll try our best. Let's start with a message from the House. Appears we still have some House bills headed this way. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 627, Delegate Acevero, Commission on Historic, Cultural, and Civic Contributions in Education, Establishment Rules.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They will be referred to the Rules Committee. Let's start with, actually, let's see, do we have, how's our attendance looking? Let's go ahead, let's do budget and tax. Let's start with second readers out of budget and tax. This is report number 19. Clerk will read the first bill.
House Bill 225, Chair Appropriations, Maryland Horse Industry Board, Sunset Extension, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from District 7 as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very simple bill. This just extends the Horse Industry Board from 2026, now extends it to 2036. No amendments, just move favorable on the committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 225 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 343, Delegate Rosenberg, Housing Development Projects, Housing Counseling Services, favorable.
Recognize the senator from Baltimore County as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. House Bill 343 requires recipients of funding from the DHCD, Strategic Demolition Fund, or the Baltimore Vacants Reinvestment Initiative for any project to construct, acquire, or rehab residential property for single-family home ownership, to provide information about housing counseling services to prospective residents before a contract is executed to purchase the property. It's really about ensuring that people who are going to become first-time homeowners get the kind of education and support they need to be able to purchase the home and then stay in the home once they purchase it. These housing counselors are certified by HUD, and they're employed by an approved housing counseling agency, and beginning in FY28 and afterwards, the governor would be required to put $90,000 towards those community development organizations that would partner with the housing counseling agencies. I move for the adoption. There are no amendments. I move for the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 343 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 478, Delegate Patterson, Income Tax Subtraction Modification for Classroom Supplies, Purchased by Teachers Alteration, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 45th as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 478 is identical to Senate Bill 262, which passed the Senate unanimously earlier this session. The bill simply expands eligibility for income tax subtraction modification for educators' expenses to full-time pre-kindergarten classroom teachers and pre-kindergarten state programs. The bill takes effect July 2026. There are no committee amendments. Move adoption of committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 478 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 660, Delegate D. Jones, Public Library, State Library Resource Center funding, favorable.
Recognizing the majority leader as the floor leader.
I'm going to get on my stool. Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 660 increases the per capita funding amount that must be provided to the State Library Resource Center beginning in fiscal 2028. There are no amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report. That'll do it. Thank you.
All right. Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 660 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 734, Delegate Robertson, Property Tax, Agricultural Use Assessment, Community Solar Energy Generating Systems, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 39th as the floor
Thank
leader.
you, Mr. President. House Bill 734 is identical to Senate Bill 344, which passed the Senate earlier this session. The bill extends the deadline by which a community solar energy generating system must be approved by the Public Service Commission in order to qualify for an agricultural use assessment from December 31st, 2025 to December 31st, 2030. The bill also establishes a process for the SDAT to determine in advance of construction whether a proposed agrivoltaics project will qualify for the agricultural use assessment. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 734 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 872, Delegate Coley, Law Enforcement Officers Pension System, Seat Pleasant Police Department, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 872 enables the Seat Pleasant Police Department to become a participating governmental unit of the law enforcement officers' pension system. Participating members receive eligibility and credibility services in the law enforcement officers' pension system for past employment with Seat Pleasant. No amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 872 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
House Bill 1148, Delegate Kaiser, Property Taxes, Tax Sales, Legacy Protection Program, and Tax Credits, favorable.
Recognize the senator from Montgomery County as the floor leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. House Bill 1148 is nearly identical to Senate Bill 765. This was the bill that I sponsored. I told you that this was the first time that this delegate and I ever cross-filed a bill together. There were some modifications in the House based on what we'd worked out as the Senate. The two modifications are just increases those that be eligible for the grant and increases the amount that can be paid annually to the counties. There's no committee amendments, no opposition. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1148 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
House Bill 1623, Montgomery County Delegation, Special Taxing District, Village of Drummond Authority and Organization, MC 2026, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 14th District as the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is just giving an opportunity for a local jurisdiction to have some taxing authority, but it's just unique to that district. There was no opposition, passed unanimously, no amendments. I move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, House Bill 1623 is hereby ordered passed for third reading. We've got a second reading calendar that's a Senate bill. This is report number 20, report 20. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 1007, Senator Zucker, prior authorization of state debt alterations, favorable with 7 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the Capital Budget Subcommittee.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 1007 makes some modifications to previous authorizations, but it really only does a couple things to each project. Either A, extends the projects, or just make some clarifying changes. These were at the request of the senators, but it doesn't deauthorize and authorize funding. Those are the 7 amendments detail the projects. I'd move the 7 committee amendments and adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 7 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 7 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 1007 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's do this. Can we do a quorum call quickly? And if we could ring the bells.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 42 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We have one Senate bill on third reading. Let's get that over there. This is third reading calendar 74. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 956, Senator Jennings, Maryland Transportation Authority, video tolls collection on third reading.
Senate Bill 956 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. If not, the clerk will take the almost very close to taking the call. With 44 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 956, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, let's go to the Committee on Education, Energy, and the Environment. This is report number 29. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 841, Senator Feldman, Maryland Energy Administration, Renewable Energy Generation Projects, Alternative Compliance Fee, Auctions, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee as the floor leader on this tiny little bill.
Yes, tiny little bill, rename the Utility Relief Act, Mr. President. Okay, as amended, just let me briefly go through this. Senate Bill 841 is a significant piece of legislation, energy policy legislation, that I might add, Mr. President, passed the EEE committee on a 9-to-1 vote, almost unanimous. It's almost 100 pages, so it's easy to cherry pick and be critical of one portion of the bill for not doing enough. But big picture, Mr. President, the bill needs to be viewed as part of a broader effort to address some of our short-term, medium, and longer-term issues that we can control here in the General Assembly. There's a lot in this particular space that are outside of the General Assembly's control, but we took what we can in terms of what's in our control to deal with, again, short-term, medium-term, and longer-term issues. And that effort that I just described did start last year, Mr. President, with the passage of major legislation, most notably the Next Generation Energy Act, which established, this is last session, a solicitation and approval process for dispatchable energy generation, and in some cases can get an expedited CPCN process. We already have some natural gas projects taking advantage of that. Established an application process for new nuclear energy, energy storage devices, and required by September 1, 2026, that the PSC develop a tariff rate schedule for large load customers like data centers to ensure infrastructure costs and other financial burdens associated with stresses on our grid are not borne by Maryland ratepayers. So with that background, Mr. President, if I might quickly transition to Senate Bill 841, which is in front of the body. As amended, Senate Bill 841 addresses energy affordability along the lines I just described by providing short, medium, and long-term rate relief for Maryland ratepayers through a variety of program changes and adjustments to rate-making policies that are, again, in control of the General Assembly. The bill also establishes several consumer transparency requirements for utilities, establishes significant guardrails and policies to manage data center growth in the state, and helps to consolidate and streamline important utility cost relief measures for low-income ratepayers. Mr. President, if you will indulge me, I want to just walk through, I think it's important for the body to get a broad picture of how comprehensive the bill is. It's not about one or two issues. So, Mr. President, on the short-term rate relief side of things, where we go in this bill, it reduces the Empower Maryland greenhouse gas emissions goal by about 1/3 for 2027 to 2029 plan cycle, and then gradually brings that goal back to where it would be under current law by 2036. It provides $100 million in direct rate relief by buying down the expenses attributed to the Empower program that would otherwise be passed on to ratepayers with funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund program. Mr. President, I would note that between the $100 million going to the expenses and the goal reduction, that amounts essentially to $500 million in total relief to ratepayers. $350 million of that is going to residential ratepayers if you put those two prongs together in terms of what we've done with Empower. Also, on the short-term relief side, restricts additional gas programs from the Empower program to save additional costs to ratepayers, and adds solar programs to count towards Empower. It immediately, on an emergency basis, prohibits utility practices that cost ratepayers by eliminating ratepayer-based cost recovery of utility officer compensation in excess of $250,000. You can pay your executives $14 million, but the ratepayers of our state are only going to be on the hook for that first $250,000. Over and above that, it's going to have to be the shareholders of those entities. It also eliminates cost-sharing mechanisms, including requirements on utility charge reconciliations, so that if there are excess revenues, those excess revenues will come back and benefit our ratepayers. Next up, it requires the Public Service Commission to determine if allowing the utilities to predict costs in advance are prudent for our ratepayers, as opposed to providing cost information at the time they are incurred. It lowers the threshold on large load tariffs from 100 megawatts to 25 megawatts, thereby capturing a larger universe of the data centers applying to do business in our state. It immediately requires the Public Service Commission to conduct a stakeholder meeting to establish a successor net energy metering program after we have a current statutory cap that we're going to get up to and soon exceed, and so we have to project for the future, and to come up with a successor program that minimizes ratepayer costs in the short term and the long term, and again balances costs and benefits. Again, we also look to establish under the current cap a community solar cap in each utility service territory to limit disproportionate impacts in our more rural counties, and then a transitionary period for solar projects to go through the entire development process to transition from the current net metering program to the successor program, and that's important with some predictability. It requires our state investor-owned utilities to join the PJM grid operator, and it removes a rate of return, which has the effect of removing a rate of return adder to the transmission products. This adder that's currently being utilized has been estimated to cost Maryland ratepayers $20 million, Mr. President. It establishes a consumer-friendly framework for portable solar, also known as balcony solar, that allows residential customers to easily offset a portion of their electricity through plug-in solar panels. It transitions what would have been a utility ratepayer-funded incentive under the DRIVE program to a Maryland Energy Administration grant program, again relieving some of the ratepayer impacts, and it speeds up local permitting and installation processes for rooftop solar with appropriate guardrails and final inspections by local jurisdictions. Mr. President, if I might note some of the medium and longer term parts of this bill. It requires transmission line developers to consider technological alternatives to simply just building more transition lines along with other impacts, and to provide reports every 4 years to the Public Service Commission with related information on transmission congestion and planning. It allows more large battery storage projects to bid into the existing CPCN process we created last year that's administered by the Public Service Commission. Ensures an existing incentive for new in-state nuclear generation that remains available and useful for potential developers. We have been in touch with folks in the nuclear space to make sure and make some revisions as on that front, something again that was in the Next Generation Energy Act from last year. Requires RGGI funds to be budgeted for their intended purposes instead of allowed a large balance to accrue, and establishes new priorities for a portion of those funds, including ensuring that the so-called PPRP has sufficient funding to keep conducting power light siting reviews. It also establishes a ACP-funded reverse auction process administered by the Maryland Energy Administration in consultation with the Public Service Commission to incentivize and further build out utility-scale solar with or without batteries and other Tier 1 renewables. Requires the PRP to conduct a study on streamlining the permitting process for energy development in the state and report to the Governor and the General Assembly on the study by December 31st, 2026. And subjects underground transmission line projects. Mr. President, if you recall, we did an oversight hearing on this subject to try to close a gap in federal law, subjects underground transmission line projects to the same scrutiny at the Public Service Commission as overhead transmission lines. And Mr. President, finally, it requires the utilities to provide to their customers notification on a link on their bills to any rate case proceeding that they initiate. It requires annual reporting, because we have a lot of reporting in this bill, annual reporting on the state's 3,000 megawatts statewide energy storage goal. It requires data centers to register with the Public Service Commission after an interconnection agreement is signed and provide specified information, including whether the data center intends to bring its own generation, what type of backup power it tends to have on site, and its water use. Provides permitting and other incentives for data centers that power their facilities with clean and renewable power. Ensures any interconnection costs associated with data centers are not, let me repeat, Mr. President, not passed through to ratepayers. It consolidates a number of energy assistance programs in the code under one roof, under OHUP, and adds additional flexibility to the uses of the funds. Mr. President, gives Department of General Services some additional flexibility when negotiating power purchase agreements for renewable energy, and we also create a green loan program for nonprofits to receive loans from the Maryland Clean Energy Center to provide energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in nonprofit facilities, Mr. President. And with all that, I would move the adoption of the let me just describe the two amendments very briefly. There are two amendments. Okay, amendment number 1 is technical, Mr. President, and the second amendment makes the changes I just described in my presentation, and I would move the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report on Senate Bill 841. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. Appreciate the explanation of a very complicated but important topic. Recognize the senator from the 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to have to move under Rule 53 that we lay this bill over for an hour or until the end of the third reading calendar, whichever comes first. I'm expecting an amendment. I was ordered yesterday. It hasn't arrived yet. Hopefully within the hour it will come, but I don't have it yet. Thank you.
Senator, it is the amendment to lay the bill over is effective, but it would be for the full day. So the layover is for the full day. The senator could special order.
Are we not within the last 10 days of session?
I think we're at 11.
No?
No.
Mr. President, I wonder.
Just quickly, so we have the motion. Does the senator want to withdraw the motion prior to?
I'll withdraw it for the moment.
For the moment. Let's check. Recognize the minority whip.
Mr. President, we are waiting on some amendments from the amendment office, but I think there's going to be some discussion of the extensive amendments, the amended report. So maybe we could
see where we go.
See where we go over the next little bit.
Let's do that. Don't want to rush it through. Certainly, if there are amendments being prepared, we don't want to rush beyond that. So, let's see if we can start with some discussion on the bill first, or discussion of the current amendments, the committee's amendments, and the work product, and we'll see where we are at that point. See if there's discussion on the favorable report with the amendments.
Mr. President, yeah, I mean, essentially the amendments are the bill. Would you just want to adopt the amendments and then we can discuss the entire bill as the amendments are, and then after that's adopted, we'll offer amendments?
Certainly open to that if that's if there's no objections to that on the two committee amendments. Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. The question is on the amended report on the bill as amended.
Okay.
Recognize the minority leader.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President. Obviously, a very big and inclusive piece of legislation, and I'm sure that the chairman could respond and fend off a number of questions and maybe even sit here and debate this for a few hours. But we're not interested in doing that. We want to really get down to what this bill does and essentially talk also about the perception of the bill, because as we've been saying, or we've seen, the First Amendment on this actually changed the title of the bill. Came up with a very catchy title to say that this is utility relief for Marylanders. I think it actually talked about everyday families for Maryland. So in talking about where we're going to, the discussion, obviously it's election year. And, a lot of things that are done here are meant to, we can get out of here next week and go back to our constituents and campaign and hopefully come back. And our constituents have made this the most important issue that we face this year, is the rising cost of electricity. And in doing so, we do have to go back and say that we did something. And as the chairman mentioned, there's a lot that you could look at through this legislation and say, did we do something? Yes. Did we do enough? I don't know. I think that's what a lot of people are going to determine their votes to be, whether this bill really went enough, given that we're almost 80 days into here. We had once again an opportunity to really focus on an issue that we knew is important to all Marylanders. And unfortunately, rather than having a series of bills come in, because there's been a lot of great ideas on how to address energy prices from both our side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle. There's been some great bills that have had hearings and have not moved forward, but some of them have found their way into this piece of legislation. So, we want to at least address a little bit about that. And in doing so, again, this bill proffers to lower energy costs. And we saw that from the committee, the chairman's comments, that there's both, all three, but there's short-term, mid-term, and long-term relief to ratepayers. But in the questions that we're going to provide, we want to see how that is specifically done. And given that the bill has changed so dramatically from its inception and how it was introduced, what has happened since that has occurred to where we are right now. We know there was a press conference a few weeks ago. Governor came down and led the press conference and talked about how we're going to provide rate relief to Marylanders. We talked about specific oversight into where we are with utility spending. As Chairman mentioned that was addressed with respect to compensation from utility executives. We talked about what's happening, with large load users and having to pay their fair share. That was brought up as well too. We want to see again how that actually is going to not just potentially attract data centers to come to Maryland, but is it actually going the opposite way? Is it going to deter data centers from coming to Maryland? And that's in the bill as well. You mentioned that there was $100 million to accelerate solar and battery storage programs. That's a big win for solar companies. That's a big win to be able to take ACP money and repurpose it through the reverse auction to go back out to solar. And then, of course, there was conversation about streamlining the energy programs. That's the very first part of the bill, energy assistance programs. And I think it's important to recognize that Maryland kind of leads the country in the amount of money that they put in for energy assistance programs. And while that might be a good thing, I think you have to also recognize why. Why do we have to put so much money into energy assistance programs? Are we handling the problem rather than creating a solution and addressing why energy prices are so high? In all this conversation, again, we've heard, in fact, the governor proclaimed a few weeks ago that this bill will save Maryland ratepayers $150 a year. Yes, sir.
Mr. President?
Yes, recognize the...
Yeah, I apologize to the minority leader to keep the capital budget moving. If I could have the members meet in the Silver Room for just a second.
If the members of the capital budget...
full committee.
Oh, full committee. Full committee could go to the...
Silver Room.
Silver Room, okay.
Yeah, it shouldn't take but a minute.
Okay. All right.
We'll be back when you get back, yeah.
If we can make it very quick. All right. Thank you for that, Senator.
Sure, absolutely. And I recognize the B&T committee has some important work to finalize, so capital budget is important to all of us. We'll make sure that gets done. But I want to go back to, again, the press conference that was held outside the Rotunda a few weeks ago, where the proclamation was made that whatever policy comes out, and again, I think we were going back and forth at that time between what was coming from the House and what the Senate was contemplating, was going to save Maryland households $150 a year. So I want to, again, break that down. $150 a year breaks down to $12.50 a month. That's what we're doing. We're talking about, a 97-page piece of legislation that's going to address $12.50 a month. Again, that's important, but what does $12.50 a month really look like in terms of usage? We talk about so many policies that we've created in the past on how much something would cost if we expand the RPS, or if we move Empower and we create that a little bit more, if we move into offshore wind, what the cost per month was going to be. And these costs always came out very low, but when you stack them upon each other, they grow incrementally higher. But here's what $12.50 a month in savings to utility ratepayers essentially is. In an average home that uses about 100 or 1,500 kilowatt hours per month, 1,500 kilowatt hours per month, the savings of $12.50 based on essentially a 7 cents distribution, a 12 cents supply cost, it's about 19 cents is what you're talking about for the cost of a kilowatt hour. So $12.50 amounts to about 65 kilowatt hours per month. 65 kilowatts. What's 65 kilowatt hours? Essentially, if you look back and say, how could Marylanders save the same amount of money that this massive 97-page bill provides, in that $12.50 a month, Marylanders could use essentially 2 kilowatt hours less a day. That's what this amounts to. What's 2 kilowatt hours less a day? Turning down the thermostat by 1 degree. Over the course of the month, you turn the thermostat down by 1 degree, you're going to save about $12.50. What you could do also, you could skip TV for a few nights a week. How many times are people watching, or working around the house, they've got the TV on just as background. Turn the TV off a few hours a day, will save you 65 kilowatt hours per month. So it is something to say that we went back and gave ratepayers some relief, but I want to just put it in perspective of what that really is and how easily Maryland families could save that same $12.50 through things like turning down their thermostat. So with that, Mr. President, I wanted to just see if the floor leader would yield for a few questions. And I want to keep in mind, again, how technical this bill is and what it does, but really try to kind of keep the conversation on what the savings are for each of these initiatives. Again, there's a number of different pieces in here. So what are truly the savings, and why are some of these policies being in place? So with that, if the floor leader would please yield.
Sarah may proceed.
Yeah, well, before I do that, I would add, you say all these things that have happened, other things that have happened that are, again, outside of our control. We had projects to build offshore wind that got stopped by the federal administration. We can't control the fact that a project in energy space that would provide enough power for 700,000 folks on the Eastern Shore is now stalled by the federal administration. We can't control the fact that under legislation at the federal level, the expiration of investment tax credits are occurring, which is making it even more difficult for us to build out battery storage and solar. And so when you talk about things that have happened that are outside of our control since we met last year, those are some things that we have to address. But specifically to your point, and then I also have to reiterate, and I think we've made this point before, there are things outside our control on the energy bill. And you didn't really mention the fact that when it comes to transmission lines, those are controlled by the federal level. Data centers, and we can have a whole conversation about that. We have data that 75% of the rate increases in this state are due to the growth of data centers. And that is something that we can discuss. And so again, and then what's happening PJM and the capacity markets. Now we're dealing with commodity prices because of a war in Iran. Again, this General Assembly does not have control of that. But what we do have control of is a few things. Number one, yes, again, when you talk about the goal reductions plus the $100 million of CEF money going to Empower expenses, that is cumulatively $500 million that are reducing the burden on our ratepayers of our state, both business and residential, $350 million to ratepayers. And yes, so when we talk about this 150, I knew that the minority leader would harp on this number, which is why I had to go through the presentation of the floor report, how this 97-page bill is much broader than what's going to be on the bill next month. We're playing a little bit the long game. We started last year building a mechanism where new natural gas, all tools on deck here, and nuclear, et cetera. Now we're trying to respond to the federal administration with the expiration to build out solar battery storage, which is quicker to get online, because one of our biggest issues, and I know this is a bit long-winded, Mr. Minority Leader, but the longer issue is the supply-demand imbalance. How do we get more generation into our state? And we do a lot in this bill. So it's not about we're not playing the 1 month game here. We're playing the 2, 3, 4, 5 year game in terms of, again, supply demand imbalances, more generation of all sorts. And yes, so the one saving right off the bat is this, again, $100 million CEF money into Empower, plus, again, the reduction of the greenhouse gas emission goals of Empower. Beyond that, we then go into what are the utilities doing and how can we close some either loopholes or what they include in their rates that they pass on to our ratepayers. So one thing was mentioned earlier, our ratepayers should not be on the hook for 10 or $15 million salary, so we put a cap. Okay, that is a savings. That is separate from Empower. How do they do their multi-year rate plans? Okay, well, we're taking a look and saying that if you do that and there's a reconciliation after the fact and it benefits the ratepayers of our state, you don't get to pocket it. Under this bill, the ratepayers are going to get the benefit of that reconciliation if they misforecasted and they overspent. There's that. We've got, I mentioned earlier the loophole that we found at the federal level, where there are billions of dollars that have been spent on underground transmission lines that have circumvented the Public Service Commission process and gone right to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the utilities have been able to get higher rates of return through that process as opposed to going through the Public Service Commission. What does this bill do? It closes that loophole. It subjects those projects, billions in infrastructure, to the same rules of the road that exist for overhead transmission. That's another kind of, I would say, absolutely a savings. I mentioned the DRIVE Act earlier. That is a ratepayer incentive system, a program, a pilot that was created a few years ago. We convert that DRIVE Act to an MEA, Maryland Energy Administration grant program, taking the burden off of ratepayers. And then we have a number of efficiency programs. For example, even the Empower program. What did we do with the Empower program, Mr. President? If I might make this point, because there's been criticism about the Empower program. We have a study, how to improve. We put that in the bill to how to make it work a little better. Efficiency-wise, we're asking the Public Service Commission to take a look as opposed to the utilities having 7 different programs. We're looking to make it a single administrator to oversee. So even within Empower, it is in need of reform. So we have a study, a couple of PSC proceedings. So there's a lot in this bill that's not playing, again, the 1-2 month gig that I think the minority leader is referring to. We're playing the long game on multiple levels. And so I think that responds in part to your question, Mr. Minority Leader.
No, I appreciate that. And it is good to hear the recognition that we do have to go back and reevaluate a lot of the policies that we put forward in the past, because that is truly what's driving up utility rates in Maryland. And yes, it's easy to always blame the federal government and to say that something has gone wrong there, or a tax incentive is no longer there, or the war somewhere is doing those things. But you're right, those are things that we can't control. We can control the policies that we create in Maryland, and that's the part of the conversation that I think needs to continue to have, is what policies we've created, what they've done to ratepayer, what the impact has been. You've mentioned offshore wind, and again, I knew that would end up coming up at some point in time, but at the same time, that was passed 12 years ago back here in the General Assembly. That's not one administration saying that they don't want to see offshore wind. It's the economics that offshore wind doesn't work, even with the amount of ratepayer subsidies that Maryland was putting forward with that. And it wasn't just the first bill that we did. Then we came back, a number of years later, and we talked about building 8 gigawatts of offshore wind power. But at the same time, it required more and more incentives to go forward with that. So yes, that is generation, but that would have come at a huge impact to ratepayers to pay for all those subsidies. So I would agree that there are things that need to be done on both the short and long term. The messaging, again, is very clear on how it comes out, that this is a short-term relief plan. And the problem, again, being that this is a bunch of bills put into one bill, it makes it hard to have the discussion on each of the items you brought up, because I certainly would have liked to do that to see where we are with things. The other thing that's been mentioned...
Might I respond just to one point that you made about offshore wind, about ratepayer impacts? Just to be clear, under I believe the legislation we passed a few years ago, until there was actually power being generated by that particular project, the ratepayers, in fact, were not going to be paying, to my understanding, is my recollection, anything towards that. It was key. I think the key there was when the generation began. That was how that program, I think, was structured. But
yeah, no, that's correct.
Yeah.
That ratepayers would not be forced to pay the subsidies until power was actually being generated. And again, we haven't had to pay that subsidies, or potentially electric prices would be even higher. One of the things that was mentioned was data centers. Talked about a number of things in the bill. Talks about the registry for data centers, or essentially we call them large load users or large load companies. Talks about, again, can we find somebody else to blame? Let's blame the growth of the data center industry. Well, the data center industry is not growing in Maryland. We're not seeing a massive growth of data centers or data center companies coming to Maryland. In fact, they're very apprehensive to come to Maryland based on legislation that was done last year and legislation that's in here as well too. So, are we trying to attract data centers in this piece of legislation, or essentially is this really a market signals? And I see the senator from Howard County is up and would certainly be
I'm
happy
going to,
chat with
yes,
her
on that
about
point, I will say one of the biggest difference between the House product and the Senate product is I think we put a lot of meat on the bones on the topic of data centers, and the senator that spent more time than anybody else here was the senator from District 9, and if I could yield to the senator, because Minority Leader brought up the topic of data centers, I think it would be helpful for the body to hear from the senator from the 9th District.
District 9.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill addresses short, medium, and long-term energy costs. And one of the things we're dealing with right now is the huge increase in demand from data centers. The Independent Market Monitor, which is an independent body that monitors, by FERC, what PJM does, they have determined that in the last 2 years, 75% of the capacity cost, which is $9 billion, is attributed to data centers. So you say, what does that mean in Maryland? Well, currently, we don't know exactly, but there's somewhere between $10 and $20 a month that we are already paying to subsidize the data centers across the entire PJM region. And so what we really need to do is for PJM to step up, do the right thing, and make the data centers pay their fair share. If we were to do nothing, colleagues, the continued growth of these data centers would grow to be 32 gigawatts across the PJM area. That equates roughly to $163 billion, which could be an additional $70 per month on everybody's residential energy bill. So we haven't talked about it yet, but the tariff in this bill, which is in line with what other states are doing, it brings the tariff from 100 megawatts to 25 megawatts. So all of these large load users who are over 25 megawatts with a capacity factor of over 60% and not excluded as some of the industrial manufacturing companies under the bill, they will have to pay their fair share. They will have to pay for transmission, distribution, and capacity, and any other costs that PJM sends to us. But colleagues, what you have to realize is we cannot control here in this body what PJM does. That is why many of you have been participating with me in something called the PJM Legislators Collaborative, where all 13 states plus Washington, D.C. are calling on PJM to act. We are calling on PJM to send the costs of these that are incurred by these large load customers to the local service delivery areas where these large load users are based. And colleagues, if and when they start to do that, we will stop paying for the data centers in Loudoun County, Virginia.
Thank you, Senator. You brought up a very good point about the growth of the data center industry. But unfortunately, it's really not coming to Maryland, right? I mean, the queue for data center projects, we're not seeing the same type of interest in Maryland as Virginia and as Pennsylvania are seeing. So when we look at this legislation and creating this registry and in creating this tier of gold and platinum levels based on the amount of clean energy that you bring to the state, in a sense, we're being almost more restrictive for data centers coming into Maryland.
I disagree respectfully with the senator, the Senate Minority Leader. We have long lines of data centers banging on our doors. I've been talking to many of them. All of the utility clusters, they're studying these data centers in clusters. They are currently full. So the biggest problem our data centers have right now is they can't get into the clusters that are being studied by the various utilities. I've spent the past weeks and months talking to data centers who are willing to do anything they can to get access to Maryland land, Maryland water, Maryland energy. They're not concerned about how much it costs. They're concerned about the time it's taking the utilities to study them. I know of one of the largest data center companies in the world I've been negotiating with for the past month. They are dying to come into here. They are in full support of this bill, and I do not think that they see it as restrictive. The bill is carefully balanced to be a combination of carrots and sticks. The tariff in here is something we did last year. It is in line with other states are doing this year, but the incentive, colleagues, that the good senator referred to, the incentive of the gold and platinum, that will draw the data centers who are willing to be those good grid citizens. It will bring those data centers to Maryland, and it will hopefully set us on the track to be the best place for the right kind of data centers.
Again, and I can appreciate, but that's the criteria that is being put in place with this. You have to be the best data center to come here. You have to be the cleanest data center to come here.
Absolutely not. Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Right? Okay.
No, that part of the bill is entirely voluntary, right? That is an incentive. So we are saying that if you would like to be one of those gold or platinum data centers, then we will give you these benefits. There is nothing stopping any other data center from coming to the state of Maryland.
I might say, other than the regulations that we put in place that will essentially prohibit on-site generation, because that's, again, what we are trying to attract with respect to data centers. We want to see those that will generate their energy on site. That usually entails providing a gas pipeline to a data center. Many of these data centers that are looking to expand at least, or looking to grow and locate somewhere, are looking for natural gas to bring turbines on and be able to generate their own electricity on site. Very different than the data centers that are looking to come in, interconnect into the grid. And I think it's always been the position that that's been the problem. That a data center that wants to come and interconnect within the grid and absorb a large amount of power that is already set becomes a concern for not just Maryland, but for the residents around there, and how that will drive up utility costs. So in attracting a data center to come here, you have to give them the ability to generate on site. How does this bill address them being able to do that through clean energy? I mean, because that's, in order to get the gold or the platinum tier, it has to be clean energy. And I don't know if that's actually defined, but how is a 1 gigawatt data center going to locate in the state of Maryland if it's based on having to meet a clean energy standard?
So there was a lot in that. The first thing I wanted to respond to is there is nothing in this bill that prohibits a data center for coming and building a natural gas generating part of that. I mean, in fact, I believe that in our Next Generation Act of last year, we established a expedited track for natural gas, and that the PSC is getting ready to run another auction on that, and so another RFP on that. So I think it would be a great business move for a data center to jump on board with a natural gas generator and do that. Of course, they can't get the voluntary clean capacity standard, but they don't necessarily need it. There's multiple ways to bring data centers to Maryland in this bill, and there is nothing in this bill that prevents a data center from coming with natural gas.
Okay, I didn't say prevent them, but I just said as we were talking about attracting them, again, it becomes more difficult for a state that is going to be more restrictive on bringing natural gas to the locations. And again, per the bill and the 2 tiers, when it's talked about the gold and platinum, it is for clean energy. And so the question might be, what does clean energy generate? I mean, what was the type of on-site generation that the committee thought about when putting together these 2 tiers or designated these 2 tiers for being clean energy? At the same time, it seems to be that there's language in here also that became a little bit more restrictive for generation on site that is not connected to the electric system. And that's essentially what we're talking about with data centers at some period of time, that they will generate their own electricity. We would like them to be off the grid. But yet there looks to be an expansion of the building energy performance standards in requiring buildings that are, again, not interconnected to the grid, that generate on-site electricity, that they now are responsible for meeting RGGI standards and the compliance fees that are associated with that. Do you recall that part of the bill and why that was added?
Yes, once again, there were several questions which I'd like to unpack. The first one was your question about what would count for the clean capacity tiers. If you look on page 49 under the reprint, there is a definition of incremental resources, which includes one or more of a combination of the following: located within the applicable locational delivery area, behind the meter storage facilities, so that's batteries, newly interconnected storage facilities, purchasing or establishing non-emitting resources within the locational deliverability area, including new clean energy generation assets, new virtual power plant aggregations, and a demand response program the Commission determines meets the goal of this section. So I would argue that we've got a pretty good definition in there of what would be allowable under that voluntary program.
Just real quickly on that, you mentioned...
You're going to ask me, sorry. Questions, you might have to refresh my memory on your other one.
All right, go ahead.
Just remember, if we can avoid you, keep it as
I'm sorry.
personalized. Oh, good. No, both in all cases, not individual.
It would be helpful if I could be asked one question at a time.
That would be ideal. That would be ideal.
That would be ideal. Yes. Okay.
Whichever
Senator,
question you want.
what do we see? Minority Leader would.
Again, I appreciate that. That was the response to the being able to bring your own power in clean energy, but in conversation, I don't know that virtual power and storage, which are two of the things that you mentioned, are really two of the things that were mentioned that drives a critical infrastructure project like a data center.
Well, I have some examples, Senator, of other companies that are doing this. I believe that Google has signed a 1 gigawatt solar PPA in Texas to supply its data centers. They also have entered into a nuclear agreement for 25 years with NextEra. Then we look at what Amazon is doing in Oregon. They have a data center region that is powered by up to 95% of renewable energy achieved through direct procurement. Amazon also has a long-term agreement for nearly 2 gigawatts of carbon-free nuclear power. If I go on, there's also a new company called Veris that is developing next-generation data centers in the Midwest and Northwest and is actively looking to come to the Mid-Atlantic region, who has said that part of this bill will probably make Maryland one of the most attractive states in the Mid-Atlantic. They used advanced battery storage instead of diesel generators, reducing emissions while providing fast, flexible backup power. And really what we have to do is start looking at these data centers as the way to help build up the grid that the 21st century demands. They can be part of the solution, and what this bill does is it incentivizes them to think a little bit more deeply, and if they want to come and be part of our portfolio, there are incentives to help them do that in an easier manner.
Okay, I appreciate that, and you talking about the very good marketing of a few companies that they have and what they're trying to do and where they're trying to go. But I do want to go back to one of the questions I had earlier with respect to BEPS and in talking about infrastructure that's on site for on-site generation that's not connected to the grid, because language was added that appears to make any of these on-site generations not connected to the grid have to comply with RGGI standards, and then at the same time potentially pay alternative compliance fees for admissions. Is that something that isn't that somewhat of an expansion of the BEPS program, and why was that necessary to add in the bill?
Give me just 1 second. I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, but from memory, there is a company that would like to come and provide off-site, off-grid generation, and they floated multiple amendments around how they could do that. What you have in here in this bill is not an expansion of the BEPS program, which I could talk to you at length over, but a contraction of the BEPS program, because currently any non-grid connected energy is currently subject to our BEPS standards. And so in conversations, this was actually an amendment added by the good senator from Cecil County. And there was several amendments. This was the version of the amendment that MDE had suggested. What it does, in a nutshell, is it looks at like how many gigawatts you are bringing, and then it looks at what the profile of the emissions is on that compared to what the grid is doing. And so, if you were going to bring, 800 megawatts, and you were I just need 1 minute to find something. I can't find the MD later. Yeah.
I guess the clarification as you're looking at that, Senator, would also be, is a facility like Cove Point, which is the LNG exporter, are they now subject to RGGI? Because they are certainly provide some on-site generation there. And I've heard from the same individuals that have been working with the committee that this language, as changed by MDE, so very different, I think, from what I heard from the amendment that was offered, or and even some of the conversations that went through. But this is actually becomes more restrictive, this language that MDE provided. And so we can discuss this later, because I do have an amendment to change some of that language, because I do think it's gone. And what we're being told by on-site energy providers, that this language became more restrictive, and there was a meeting that was held talking about how to make sure that on-site generation could occur, because as was mentioned earlier with data centers, that's what all of us would like to see, that a large load user generates on-site, doesn't have to tax the grid, doesn't have to use electricity from that, but could generate on-site. The concern is that this language, again, put forward by MDE, makes it even more restrictive than it is currently.
To the minority, Senator could which section is the Senator referencing?
I've got section.
To the degree it's readily available.
Yeah. I think it's under the Environment Article 2-1602 is where it starts. And then.
So if I could, I found the sheet that I was looking for. It basically, the intent of MDE's amendment was to create parity between the existing generators and the covered buildings law, which is currently under BEPS. The on-site generators whose emissions are equal to or better than the grid average would pay a reduced ACP equal to the RGGI price, which is what buildings sourcing their power from the grid currently pay. So the on-site generation whose emissions are higher than the grid average would comply with BEPS normally for their extra emissions over the average grid power. This is a way for those companies to get out of BEPS. And there's other amendments out there, but those amendments were not able to be adopted, in the committee, and I do not think that they would survive conference committee either.
Okay. Well, again, I know we all talked to different people that have been very interested in this bill, and one of the last conversations I had was that this was actually put on-site generation in a worse position than it was currently. So, again, maybe this conversation could be offline to make sure that it is not seen that way, and that these on-site energy generating, whether it's companies or products, can be utilized in the state if that's what we're going to try to attract when it comes to these large load users.
I'd be happy to speak with you offline on this. It actually wasn't my amendment.
Okay, that's fine. When we also, it was mentioned about different tariffs that were set in place with respect to large load users. One of the amendments talked about essentially notwithstanding the section of the public utility article that deals with rate discrimination. So in our laws already, we've recognized that rate discrimination can exist. But in lowering the thresholds for the large load users from 100 to 25 megawatts, and then looking at the load factor and bringing that from 80 to 60%, there is a new tariff that we're asking the PSC to put in place. But it seems to be, because of the way that this is written, that we are allowing rate discrimination to occur when setting new tariffs and new rates for large load users. Was that the intention?
I highly doubt that that's accurate. We're getting
Okay.
Okay. Council is saying that the Public Service Commission has always had that discretion
To adjust rates based on different classes? Because that's something that we've talked about.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about a few years ago. We actually, one of the things that we have tasked the Public Service Commission with doing without putting it in legislation was looking at different rate classes. And in fact, there was even conversation about a low and moderate income rate class, a lower rate that could be done. And I think the PSC has been looking at that over some period of time. But is the intent of possibly allowing that to go forward to then increase rates for other users? So, I mean, in rate discrimination, I think the case was you could always lower rates, but could you make rates higher for a certain class of either individuals or for businesses?
What this bill is seeking to do is to protect the ratepayers across the state of Maryland, including my constituents and your constituents. We suspect that PJM is going to is going to conduct a major auction in September, which the data centers who have committed to paying their fair share are going to buy into. Once they conduct that auction, PJM is going to send us a major bill. So each load-serving entity's locational region, like the BGE territory, will get a bill corresponding to the capacity purchased by the data centers in that area. In this bill, we are instructing that the PSC to take the large load costs, which are coming from PJM, and assign them to the large load customers. If we did not do this, then the areas of our state that have the highest number of data centers and the fewest people, it would be socialized equally, and our rates would completely balloon. And I'm sure that nobody in this body wants that.
No, that's accurate. But at the same time, there seems to be lots of places in this bill where we're trying to instruct PJM to do something. And
No, we are responding to what PJM may or may not do to empower our commission to respond appropriately and in line with what many, many other states will be doing.
And so when you talked about PJM, this is a different capacity auction, or you're saying the next capacity auction that is going to come forward that was just mentioned, or was it something different that is expected from PJM?
There are multiple ways that PJM could operate, and I do not pretend to have a PJM crystal ball. However, they are currently contemplating, one capacity auction for everybody else and one capacity auction for the large load users. So there could be 2 capacity auctions in September. There's currently a number of working groups on the topic. I'm sure they would love to have the Minority Whip attend any of their working groups, but they're working through the details on this and trying to figure out how to make sure that all large load customers, that their capacity bills are being able to be identified and sent. Because once again, all of the data centers who are there in Washington, D.C., with the FERC chairman and the president, they all agreed to pay these costs and are expecting the bill.
Okay. And I think, even though we're debating some issues, I think we are largely aligned on data centers generating their own electricity on site, their own power on site. I think that is one of the things that is being seen, across the country as states are trying to attract data centers. They want to look at those that can either generate their own site or have a dedicated resource to bringing that on site, as to not provide impact to local ratepayers. So from that perspective, I think there are some things in this bill that make sense. I was concerned about, again, the language that I had mentioned earlier, and again, we can take that offline to look at that further. So thank you very much for that. If I could ask the floor leader to yield again, Mr. President.
Yes, Sarah may proceed.
There were a couple locations in the bill that dealt with, again, and going back to the conversation of, are we really trying to lower rates for Maryland families? But there's 2 locations that dealt with prevailing wage for solar projects, private sector solar projects, and again, I think for data centers as well too. But what was the rationale for requiring private sector companies like data center developers to have to pay a prevailing wage?
Yeah. Okay, which section of the bill are we looking at?
I've got 7-207.6.
Okay, I believe. Yes. Hold on a second.
Solar.
Yeah. So current law, actually under current law, for projects that go through the CPCM process, you have to pay prevailing wage. That is the law. But one of the challenges has been enforcement, and that has been a problem. So really, this does not change existing law for projects going through the CPCM process. What it does say is, when you're in that process, it puts in place a bit of an enforcement mechanism. In other words, what we don't have is that you have to show, et cetera, document that you're actually doing it, and then there's an enforcement process. I don't know if it's through who enforces, what state agency takes a look. Yeah, the Department of Labor is involved. So it's closing, I would say, a gap under current law, dealing with, again, projects that are, because it's kicking in, if you look at the minority leader takes a look at the language, it's bringing in the CPCM process, and then you're, again, into what's current law, but the enforcement has been a problematic, and this attempts to address that.
Okay. But it still does, whether it's current law or now, it's closing loophole, but prevailing wage is required currently for all solar developers on projects?
I apologize. Yes, Mr. Minority Leader, that is current law, so it's not changing. Again, this is for projects in the CPCM process, 2 megawatts or above are currently subject to prevailing wage.
Right. Thank you. There were, and you brought it up in your opening statement, conversations about utility company executive compensation. I think the number $14 million was referenced. I'm assuming that's for an individual that might be the CEO of a large public utility company. But as we start talking about numbers, again, perception means a lot here. You know, that company might have a number of different subsidiaries that all report back to a parent company. So to suggest that all $14 million of somebody's compensation is borne by one utility might not be completely accurate. If there were, for instance, 7 utilities, that maybe $2 million was allocated to each one. But in talking about that, and again, I understand that people don't like to hear that executives from major companies make a lot more money than people that are not executives or everyday workers that are out there. But to suggest that all $14 million is being borne here, I don't think is accurate. But more importantly, in the bill, the bill that was first discussed when we talked about trying to essentially curtail the amount of money that could be passed on to ratepayers, it was talked about supervisors. But the bill then was changed to officers. So can you explain the difference and why that change was made from supervisor to officers of a public utility company?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could I yield to the senator from the 23rd District? That was his one-word amendment in committee, and I'd yield to the senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. The reason that change occurred is because when we started talking about excessive salaries, we were very specific to executives, vice presidents, CEOs, CIOs, and the like. And the term supervisor was put in there, which would encompass anyone who manages people. And we're going from nothing to the top and pretty much saying everyone that makes over 250. What I tried to do is strike a middle ground, get some data back, and see if it's really a benefit to ratepayers, which is why I went with the term officer, which is why the committee went with the term officer.
Okay, thank you. But in mentioning that explanation, it was just mentioned that it was a one-word amendment. Is that accurate? Did it simply just change supervisor or change officer from supervisor? Did it actually change the definitions as well?
No, the amendment as you're looking at it really was just a one-word change.
Okay. All right. And I certainly understand that. I think that was a better change to make sure that it is the corporate executives that this is targeting and not the supervisors. Supervisors could be a number of different people within a public utility company that manage people. And I think there's some further clarification on being able to hire, fire, lay off, being responsible for the performance of work and responding to complaints, a number of different things, but that language is still in here. So I'm concerned that the amendment may not have done everything that it was hoped to have done, and to really target corporate executives rather than somebody that could work in an office at a public utility company and have supervisory roles, which it still talks about, but may not have a specific title. So just wondering if that was addressed.
That was addressed, and if you ever get exhausted, we do have an amendment for that. And so, but yes, that was an oversight. The intent of that amendment was to utilize executive officer as the meaning stated of the financial institutions article, which is very, very specific, meaning president, vice president, senior officer responsible for business operations, chief financial officer, or other individual who performs similar functions.
Well, that sounds like a very good amendment. So
thank you.
Looking forward to that one. Thank you very much, Senator. Could the chairman yield again for a few more questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you very much. Just going back to Empower, as we talked about, that was a source of immediate or short-term rate relief. We've had this discussion about Empower a number of years here on the Senate floor. In fact, I think most recently with the Climate Solutions Now Act, and making changes to Empower at that time, which I can remember in a very similar conversation between two individuals that are standing up right now. We talked that there would be a dramatic increase to Empower based on the Climate Solutions Now Act, and that would actually come into effect in January of 2026. So we've seen that increase hit. The way that the legislation is right now, does that scale that back, what we did in Climate Solutions Act now, or is this just a use of $100 million from the SEEF fund to pay off some of that debt and then change the goals?
Okay, well, again, a couple of questions in the minority leaders. One thing that we are changing, scaling back, are the goals. So right now in 2027, the goals are at the it's going to be 2.5%. Under the bill that's in front of us, we're scaling it back down to 1.75 for 27, 28, and 29, and then we're going to, again, little by little, by 2036, get back to the 2.5% that would be a current law in 2027. And so, scaling back in that sense. The other thing about the 100 million, and this goes to, I think, a debate that the two people standing up had a few years ago, had to do with the debt and paying off the debt versus running up the credit card in perpetuity, and we had a pretty vigorous discussion about that subject. But this 100 million is not, because the numbers were run as to taking this $100 million and paying down the debt versus $100 million towards Empower programs and the costs of Empower programs, and the numbers that came back were it was better for our ratepayers to use the $100 million to direct it at the programmatic expenses as opposed to paying down the debt. And so when you talk about scaling back, I'm not entirely sure what the minority leader is referencing to, but we are scaling back the goals that were set forth in the Climate Solutions Act. The $100 million is going towards programming expenses, not the debate we had about the credit card and pulling off the Band-Aid and that whole back and forth. So maybe you could clarify a little bit more when you say scaling back.
Right, well, the scaling back of the goals, right? We were 2.25, we're supposed to be there this year. We're gonna go bring that back to 1.75 for the goals. So that's in this legislation. So
correct.
That's what I was questioning. It also allows community solar to be used for achieving Empower goals, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so those two things, from what I understand, are the major drivers on where ratepayers are going to see a reduction on their utility bill. They should see, and I guess the question would be, how quickly should ratepayers see a reduction in their Empower expenses on their utility bills?
Okay, I think the answer is within the next 6 months. Because of the cycles, there's a timing aspect to this, and so my best information is that within 6 months, our ratepayers will see some concrete benefits.
Okay. Just one more line of question, and then I've got I think hopefully we can come to an agreement on something. The SEEF fund has been obviously a source of revenue for the state to utilize as it pleases during the budget process. And there's been many conversations about how the SEEF fund is replenished each year. It's obviously done through RGGI compliance fees that come in, but RGGI fees are pretty much, once they're in the SEEF, have dedicated uses towards them. The other revenue source is the alternative compliance fees that are paid by suppliers when they cannot meet the RPS goals. And so last year, the General Assembly took the step to take $200 million of that CEF fund and return it to ratepayers in the form of that legislative relief fund. I think $200 million equated to $80 per household. This year, we didn't put any immediate relief back to ratepayers in the form of a rebate of the money that they had already essentially overpaid through suppliers baking in the ACP payments into rates. Why did the committee discuss trying to resolve the policies that would reduce ACP payments going into CEF, or is the feeling that, hey, the General Assembly likes $100 million, or what is almost $1 billion in the CEF fund to utilize as it pleases, and therefore not make any changes to why ACP payments have been growing very dramatically each year?
Yeah, well, the fundamental reason why ACP, I mean, this is economics. The minority leader is a private sector guy, and it's less expensive under the current structure because of the, in effect, it's hard supply constraints in terms of the rec market has driven up pricing. It's easier and cheaper under the current, literally, to just pay the compliance fee than to go out and purchase recs. So there's been an upward pressure on rec prices to go out and purchase those allowances. And so that is one of the reasons it's harder to build the solar projects, for some of the reasons I just mentioned, because of the expiration of investment tax credits at the federal level and all these things. So for the companies that are in the position to have to meet the RPS requirements, it's harder and harder and more expensive to go out and do that. And so currently it is less expensive or economical to more economical to do that. And that has been, the result of that has been to the ACP, the CEF fund, that portion of the CEF fund, again, it's RGGI money and ACP, has had a big significant uptick. So that part of the equation is accurate. That's the economics of where we are in terms of rec prices. So we did not address that in a direct way. What we did do was to try to leverage 100 million, instead of the $100 million sending it back for $40 to ratepayers, what we do with that 100 million is leverage that into what is a reverse auction process, a low bid reverse auction process, because again, these ACPs are paid because of solar projects that have not been built, and so there is a clear nexus. So we're taking that same money. Originally, the alternative compliance payment was called the Clean Energy Fund, back I think at some point originally. So we're taking that, there is a nexus, and trying to leverage that to build new generation, in-state generation in Maryland through, I think, a pretty innovative process where there's a bidding process. Whoever wants to develop solar in our state, the lowest bid wins, and there's a lot of criteria to do that. And so that's what we chose to do this session with the monies that, as opposed to that sitting there or sending back people $40, we're going to actually be able to produce a lot of what I believe is solar, both battery storage, et cetera, leveraging that in the private market. And so that's the way we dealt with it this particular session in this bill, through the reverse auction as opposed to again a $40 check to ratepayers.
Because obviously, looking on the board, this conversation is about what the original intent of this bill was to do, to try to address the ACP payments coming in, but it was through this reverse auction process. So essentially, this, rather than addressing the issue on why rec prices are where they are, or why ACP payments are getting to be, in the $360 to $380 million a year, it was decided to just essentially reallocate those dollars into solar projects through this reverse auction process. And it appears then that this just becomes a further subsidy for solar projects. And when we're talking about where Maryland is from a perspective of energy generation, solar is not going to close that gap of Maryland having to import over 40% of its energy from out of state. Solar is going to be available, when the conditions are right. And yes, maybe at some point in time, solar will be available to charge batteries, but the technology is not there yet. Why not just address the policies that have been created in the past and go back and say that maybe they didn't work based on a number of conditions that were mentioned earlier, whether they be, federal issues or other state issues, but this type of development to meet the recs to comply with the RPS can occur notwithstanding solar, can occur anywhere in the PJM region.
Okay, so two things. Number one, by far, the right now, both in the PJMQ and elsewhere, the quickest form of energy that we can get online is solar battery storage. So let's start with that. And the net result of that is the more solar you have out in the marketplace, that will drive down ACP prices, which will in turn address, I think, some of the concerns that you have just raised. So I would, you say subsidy. This is an attempt to leverage money that is in the CEF through a bidding process by solar developers competing to want to build in this state. And so, we're using that money in that way. I think it's a better use of the money, leveraging it in that way. But the byproduct of it all is more solar and battery storage, which should produce downward pressure on ACPs and make it less likely that the utilities will pay alternative compliance payments as opposed to going out and purchasing the REC. So obviously we see things very differently.
Well, we can see things the way that they are presented in the PSC's RPS report that they put out annually, and we've seen the ACP payments skyrocket from what was probably $60 million 4 years ago to almost $380 million now. So something is not right when it comes to the policies that are in place to see that type of trend happen with respect to where we are with ACPs. Again, in using this reverse auction format, really just puts us in a position to, and again, I will say subsidize solar, because that's what they're doing. They're putting in applications for shovel-ready projects to say, we will do this if the PSC turns around and hands us more money that has been derived from ratepayers overpaying their electric bills or paying too much for electricity because of the policies created. So I think that rather than furthering to subsidize solar, could we be in a position to address the policies themselves? And, again, I think that's just a fundamental difference that has been discussed many times on this floor before.
Okay, may I just respond, Mr. President, very briefly? Okay, again, just to the nexus here, the reason the ACP monies are coming in because solar in our state is not being built, and so that using that ACP money to build the solar in-state generation that is not happening, to me, again, is a logical nexus. And by the way,
Let's be specific. The reason ACP payments are coming in is because solar is not meeting goals that we put in place as the legislature. That's why ACP payments are coming in. If the goals were less, if the goals were reduced to be more in line with what is possible and probable, then ACP payments wouldn't have to be made. So it's not just the development of solar, it's not reaching these very aggressive and actually artificial goals that the state has created.
Okay, and also, again, this is a semantics thing, but the alternative compliance payment money is coming from the utilities, okay? It's not like you're sending the money directly to the C fund on your bill. I mean, there is
Well,
a
we've already
process by
complained
which-
about how much executive compensation is being made. So I would assume that if the utility companies are bearing this expense, that it's being passed on, or actually the suppliers, if they're bearing this expense, it's being passed on to ratepayers.
Okay, I hear you about the broader RPS issues and the marketplace for RECs and all that, Mr. Minority Leader. That we can't solve. I think I said this in my opening remarks. We cannot solve all the problems that have been identified in this bill. We started a process last session. We're building on it this session. This is going to be several sessions trying to continue to move forward and build more in-state generation, which addresses kind of the point you make. We could use some partners at the federal level, and federal policy would be helpful. That's not the case right now. So these are big issues you raise. As I say, we can't take it all in and address and solve them this session or in one bill. And I'm not representing that this bill addresses everything, but it addresses a lot of the issues that are in front of this General Assembly this session.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. Let's see if we can maybe agree on one thing, just because I know a number of amendments are going to be offered, and in the presentation of the amendment and the usefulness of it, I'm sure we're going to talk about what the savings would be. And I think we saw last year the Legislative Relief Fund used $200 million, and that $200 million equated to $80 in ratepayer relief. Is an appropriate assumption that we could use then for every $100 million in savings, it would apply essentially to $40 in ratepayer relief?
No, I don't think that necessarily works. I mean, as I say, the $100 million we're using for the reverse auction, I believe will pay dividends for the ratepayers, in-state generation, addressing our demand supply. I think that will exponentially be far in excess of that. That's why we're using the $100 million for the reverse auction and not doing what you described. And so I think, no, I don't think that's an accurate analysis. I would not, respectfully, with all respect to the minority
In a
leader.
different analysis, with all respect, would $200 million going into the general fund equate to $160 per family per year?
Okay, again, I would
not
need.
leveraging-
I'd have to get some counsel from the Budget and Tax
Okay.
chair or something. I'm not prepared to equate apples and oranges on the floor here and just wing it.
All right, I appreciate that, and understand that, again, we can go with savings, we can go with the absolute amount. We know whether it's $200 million or $300 million, how that equates back to per monthly or annual savings can be determined a number of different ways, is what you're saying. So that, Mr. President, I yield, and I know there'll be a few more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Recognized Senator from the 37th District on the amended report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd had kind of a general question about the report. Would it be okay to ask?
For the floor leader, Senator may proceed.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Floor Leader. In 2024, in June of 2024, Governor Moore issued one of his first executive orders, and it dealt with the climate pollution reduction plan. In one provision in that executive order, it states that Maryland's Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022 sets ambitious climate goals for the state, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 60% by 2031 and obtaining a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And a lot of people have talked to me about energy, the production of energy, and some of these goals that have been put in place, specifically this goal, obtaining a net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2045. Does the bill or the amended report do anything to alter that goal that has been put in place?
No, I mean, that 2022 bill, what we are changing to the legislation from 2022 is simply on the Empower program, changing the goals that were put in place and lowering those greenhouse gas emission goals. As far as the broader policy call that is referenced in the executive order, I mean, to the extent we can build literally more renewable energy projects in this state, that has the effect of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a more macro response to your question. But in a direct sense, you know, there's parts of this bill that are building both net metering program, the reverse auction program, and some other things that, quite frankly, all benefit us reaching those goals. But in a direct sense, the only thing in the bill is really the Empower reduction of the goals in the Empower program, which is a very specific program, not the broader topic of energy policy in the state.
And then there was another provision in that executive order that says, whereas, you know, Maryland has a set goal of 100% clean energy by 2035, a goal of having all of our energy be clean energy by 2035, and that was an executive order. And so, you know, with that executive order, how does that, is that addressed at all by the report? And, you know, how is that affected by the report? Because from what I've been told is that, you know, with that goal in place, if you want to try to invest in energy generation, and we have a statewide goal of 2035, no one would be able to borrow money to be able to get the funds to actually grow generation, because Maryland's already set a goal saying we're not having any other type of energy. I'm talking about like natural gas or something of that nature. But because Maryland already has a goal of 2035, if you were to go to a lender and ask, the lender would say, well, you know, that play out on that is about 30 to 50 years for the amount of money. With that goal in place, that's like a barrier to investment in trying to bring new generation to Maryland. And I was just wondering if the report in any way changes that, or if that's affected by the report.
Okay, well, you're referencing new generation of energy, and you're referencing goals of 2035. They're not, I mean, last year I think we made it pretty clear in the Next Generation Energy Act that it's an all hands on deck approach here. We are going, you know, a process by which to bring new nuclear into this state. In fact, there are things in the bill to make it more enticing to bring new nuclear. The issue of natural gas, we have a natural gas pipeline as a direct result of the bill last year, a natural gas pipeline coming from Constellation Energy to Harford County. And on top of that, we do here in this piece of legislation try to find ways to produce more renewable energy as well. But that, you're referencing a goal. We had a piece of legislation, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, back in 2019, which established by 2030 that 50% of our power come from renewable sources. But again, we are coming short on meeting those goals. We're trying to address some of that here. And also, I would say, I should make the point that we are also asking the Public Service Commission to do a lot of studies on the impact of data centers. There's a lot here in the mix, but this isn't 2035. There's a long way between here and 2035, even 2030 with the Clean Energy Jobs Act. So my point about new generation is nuclear, natural gas, solar, and I had thought offshore wind was ready to roll, but that is again due to things outside our control, not in the mix. I think it's all hands on deck to ultimately address the demand supply imbalance, which is a big contributor to our energy upward pressure on rates in this state. And so I think this bill, along with what we did last year, goes several steps forward to make that happen. And so I'm not sure that answers your question directly, but that's basically what this bill does.
Well, thank you. I think that it does. And what I hear is that we passed bills, or there are things in the works to try to attract or grow new generation. And, you know, for the purposes of a productive discussion on the Senate floor, I guess we could call this a colloquy. And then, so it has some merit and value. But even though there is this executive order that says there's this goal of 2035, that does not prevent or impede new generation under these programs or these different items that you've just mentioned. Is that what I'm hearing?
First of all, an executive order, you know, is not statutory requirement stuff. I'll put that out there. No, I'll repeat. I think we made it pretty clear. We made when I say we, the General Assembly made a specific statement last year in the Next Generation Energy Act that nuclear power is part of our future. And then we put in place application processes, approval process through the Public Service Commission for things that are beyond nuclear. Clearly, the natural gas project I referenced earlier is going through an expedited procedure now. 295 days after application, there's going to probably be action at the Public Service Commission. So this is not this issue that, it's all about renewable energy and solar and battery storage is simply not accurate. Right now, as we sit here, 40% of the power in the state's coming from nuclear power from Calvert Cliffs. So I think it's all hands on deck. I'm going to repeat that. This bill tries to make nuclear a little more enticing, but it does go bigger on solar and battery storage, in part to deal with the financing gaps that have been presented by action at the federal level, which is making it very more difficult to finance the projects because of the expiration of investment tax credits and other incentives at the federal level. And so that's where we are as a state. We have some control over that, and we're trying to address that in this bill. But it does not in any way preclude us from moving forward like we did last year and this year with these other forms of energy generation.
Well, thank you very much. This executive order has caught a lot of attention. It came out quickly in 2024, and it's been an issue that's been brought up a number of times. While we discuss different programs and try to address issues, the backdrop is you have this executive order out there saying, these are the goals for the state of Maryland, and they've raised a lot of concerns, and I just wanted to address those and give you the opportunity, or at least present the opportunity for them to be considered, as we consider the bill. So
okay, thank you for your questions.
All right, let's recognize the senator from the 42nd District on the amended report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I have some questions about Section 2, the amendments to Section 2-1601 and 2 of the Environment Article. Either the floor leader could respond to me, or perhaps the senator from Howard and Montgomery counties.
Senator, which section was that again?
It's part of the bill that amends Section 2-1601 and 1602.
What is the topic area? Is it
we're
data centers related, or?
We're talking about covered buildings that use only electricity that's generated on site and is not interconnected with the electric system.
Okay, I think I'll yield to the senator from the 9th District from Montgomery Howard. I think some of this was discussed a little bit earlier.
Yield to the senator from District 9. Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm looking at what this amendment to the bill does, or what this portion of the bill does, is it covers buildings that use only electricity that are generated on site and are not interconnected with the electric system, something which I would assume we would want to encourage as much as we possibly can in light of the fact that we simply are not generating enough electricity in Maryland, and we import currently 40% of our electricity, and once Brandon Shores closes down in 2029, we will be importing over 55% of our electricity. So encouraging facilities to generate their own electricity that's not interconnected with the electric system, I assume that's a consummation devoutly to be wished. I wonder if the temporary floor leader would agree with me on this?
I would agree that it would be good to encourage generation, yes.
Great. So now I looked at the definition of covered building, which is part of the existing law, and it's rather limited. It only covers historic structures, elementary and secondary schools, hospitals, manufacturing buildings, and agricultural buildings. Specifically, it does not cover data centers or any other large users of electricity. So my question is, why wouldn't this bill have expanded the definition of covered building to include data centers and other large users of electricity? We're trying to encourage organizations to generate their own electricity and not run it connected with the grid. Wouldn't it be advantageous to permit large users of electricity to take advantage of these provisions?
This is similar to the question that the minority leader asked earlier. But I'm not sure where the definition of covered buildings that you're referencing is coming from, because my understanding was that within the Building Energy Performance Standards part of the statute, that there's a really long definition of covered buildings, anything over 35,000 square feet. And so my understanding is that data centers are already included in the definition, and what the intention of this amendment was to get them out from paying 100% of the alternative compliance fees that are already required under the bill.
Well,
That is my intention.
Let me come to that
I think
in a
was
minute,
the
but
intention.
the definition of covered building is in section 2-1601, the immediately preceding section. And as I scrolled on my computer, it's about 3 thumb scrolls up above the section of the bill that we're talking about. It specifically says covered building, let me see. I'm sorry, it does not include hospitals.
So I think you just read the exceptions. So anything that's over that size of the square feet, except for what you just said, is included in the definition of a data. It is included in the definition of a covered building under the Building Energy Performance Standards.
So it includes commercial buildings. Are data centers considered commercial buildings under the statute?
Yes.
Okay, well that helps. Now let's go back to the language that I'm specifically interested in, which is you're saying it reduces their coverage. My question is, why are we making them pay anything at all? Wouldn't we want to make it as advantageous as possible? Wouldn't we want to do everything possible to encourage these covered buildings to generate their own electricity? So why would we want to require them to pay alternate compliance fees of any nature? Because that's going to discourage organizations from building electrical generating facilities adjacent to their structures.
I think partially we don't know what kind of energy they're going to use to generate it with. But once again, this was a huge policy debate, several years ago. And so the amendment that was offered in committee was an exception to a very large piece of existing policy, and it was narrowly tailored by MDE. It's not perfect, but I just wanted to go back to something that I did figure out, which is that if you're exempting a portion of the energy that is generated and having them pay RGGI instead of the ACP, you are having them pay 90% less than they would without this amendment.
Mr. President.
Senator, if we could just a moment recognize the senator from 22nd District very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, we can recognize former Senator Victor Ramirez of District 47, who's here with us with his daughter Victoria.
Welcome back, Senator. Welcome back. Thank you. Thank you for that interruption. I'm sorry. We wanted to make sure we recognize our good friend.
No problem. I'm sorry. Was the?
I think what I was trying to say is that currently RGGI is 10% of the ACP cost in the Building Energy Performance Standard. And so what this amendment would do is it could effectively reduce the amount that the data center would have to pay by 90%.
What about the second part of this, the alternate compliance fee for excess emissions? If they're greater than 0, is another fee. My question, fundamental question is, it seems to me it should be our policy to encourage as much as possible large users, data centers, et cetera, to generate their own electricity and not draw it from the system where we already don't have enough electricity and we're destined to go dark, if we believe what PJM is telling us, within the next year to year and a half. Why wouldn't we want to do everything possible to minimize the external costs imposed on these organizations and generating their own electricity? Why is this language in the bill at all? Did the committee consider simply striking any fee at all that would be imposed on organizations that want to generate their own electricity?
There were several amendments that were offered. I'd have to figure out which ones were actually discussed, but I think this was the one that the committee felt, this is the one that passed.
Okay. Thank you for your answers.
Sounds about right. Yes. Recognize Senator, the Minority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's important, and I may have a question in a moment. I just think it's important as we talk about this bill and the fact that it's been called a little bit of a Frankenstein bill, and it's supposed to be about relief for ratepayers is one of our primary focuses in the bill. It's supposed to be. I just think it's important for folks to understand, and I'll invite some response in a moment, but that there's really as we talk about people and what their bills are and how expensive their bills have gotten, there are some things beyond our control, there are some things with rising costs, but there's really a trio of Maryland state government policies, choices that impact your bill as a ratepayer, our bills as ratepayers, every month. One of them we've heard a little bit about already. We've heard a little bit about all of them, but the RGGI agreement that we are in, which adds cost to your bill every month, but also restricts the ability, it really makes it much less profitable for base load, reliable generation to come here, because it makes it really cuts down on the ability for there to be profit margin or certainly as much profit margin as there would be for companies to invest in power generation here. Number two, we have the RPS goals and the penalties that come with that when we don't meet the goals, causing, number one, to have to buy more expensive energy to meet RPS goals, or then when you fail, you have to pay the fine. That is passed on to consumers in their bill directly. And then we have the Empower program, which when it started, there were a lot of things that it was invested in, and whether someone agreed with when it started or not, which was many years ago, there were things that were invested in on energy efficiency, but a lot of that low-hanging fruit's gone, and people are still being charged every month to subsidize other people getting upgrades in their homes sometimes. And every month, on average, the estimation is it's about $21 a month on people's bills just for Empower on average. Some people it's far more than that. And there's a tacit acknowledgement that this is part of what drives up bills, because that's really the only savings that seems to be coming in this bill that's going to be immediate, is by dealing with or making adjustments to the Empower program. It is the most recent information we have is that in the last year, that trio, sort of a troika of trouble, over $600 million of ratepayer money went into that. So that cost, those choices we make, which there was supposed to be benefit to it, but the RPS system has not engendered vast amounts of in-state renewable energy production growth. Empower, the benefits that were there have been waning. And RGGI, in every state that is a RGGI state, people's rates are higher. In some cases, significantly so. For all this talk about how energy costs are growing all over the country, in the RGGI states, we're making our people pay more. When we know that from the climate perspective, Maryland being in RGGI or not being in RGGI has zero impact on really even the regional climate, but certainly on the global climate. But yet we're making our people pay a lot more. Estimates of how much RGGI costs consumers, it's estimated it adds about $20 to $25 a month on everybody's bill just because we're in RGGI. And that doesn't factor in how difficult, as I said, RGGI makes it to have investment come here to grow reliable, affordable energy like natural gas in the state. So with all that said, I wonder if I could ask my friend, the floor leader, the chairman, to yield a question.
Yes, sir.
What I just said, is there not, would it not be wise for us to go further in this bill at addressing some of these self-inflicted, state-mandated high energy costs? We could address them by going further in some things. We're going to have some amendments that I think would help it along. I would just ask, could we get some support today so we could get this to be a unanimous vote so that we could really, really reduce people's bills in a significant way?
Okay, well, I think as you mentioned, there are some amendments directly referencing a number of kind of the issues you just raised, and I'm willing to respond maybe amendment by amendment. But and you, for example, mentioned the RGGI program as being a cost driver. In fact, the studies that were presented to the committee do not support that, which is one of the reasons Virginia, which went out of RGGI under the Youngkin administration, has actually passed a bill in March putting them back into RGGI to be the 11th state part of the cooperative, the cap and trade allowance program. And so what the reason, because it seems, I think I could see you're itching to respond, Mr. Minority Whip, because much of the RGGI money goes to energy efficiency, which hits the demand side. And so the Brattle Group, I'll reference them, Berkeley, they all pointed to the fact that because of the energy efficiency side of the equation, that in fact, RGGI was not a cost driver to utility bills. What it does also point out is that 50% reductions in carbon greenhouse gas emission reductions in every RGGI state since the enactment of RGGI, which is a positive for respiratory and health. But back on rates, the studies do not, at least there is mixed. I'm sure there are some conservative think tanks and think groups and studies that say the opposite, but that is not at all clear cut. The other thing about RGGI, which you failed to mention, is that a large portion of that supports our low income folks for support on their energy bills. And so there's a lot in RGGI, because I believe there's an amendment to perhaps, I don't know, I can't say for sure, although I do have an amendment in front of me that suggests that we should get out of RGGI. There's a tremendous amount of benefits, and at least some of the studies say that there's no correlation to driving up costs. But again, we have states getting back into, including our neighbors in Virginia passed a piece of legislation to do that just in March, and by end of May of 2026, the Commonwealth of Virginia will be back in RGGI.
Thank you for your response, Mr. President. If I could continue, Virginia had an election where they elected a governor who wants to politically do that. I don't think anybody has claimed that Virginia's electricity bills are going to go down in price. And I know we're not here to debate Virginia policy, but I'll just be candid. No one will predict that their energy bills will get lower because they joined RGGI. And my understanding is that RGGI adds $9 to $12 per kilowatt hour. $9 to $12, not kilowatt, megawatt, $9 to $12 more per megawatt hour for natural gas power plant to produce power. So it's a fundamental truth that it adds cost. Every state, whether a state like Virginia has decided to join us in a race to the bottom of or not, but other states have gotten out of it or refused to join. And again, it begs the question, you brought up help for lower income folks, and certainly we want to provide, there's energy assistance programs are an important part of helping people. We had that before RGGI, so we could have it after RGGI. But also, I think lower income, right now we're making all of our Marylanders are becoming lower income because of how high our energy prices are in the state. So we could reduce prices for everybody, including those lower income folks, if we would get out of, if we would sort of, as I've talked about before, sort of declare victory on some of this stuff, like empower and get out and back out of it and let the market work a little bit more. I know we're not going to agree on that, but I do think it's important doing not just RGGI, but empower and the RPS program. We add cost up front, and we may have some long range goals and think it could be good, but wouldn't it be wise in the crisis situation that we've put Marylanders in for us to, I think, to take a step back and I just think it's very important for people to understand their bills are higher because of choices we make. We make choices, and our bills are higher. And I don't think there's any way around that. Obviously, that's not really a question, but I think it's an important thing to acknowledge.
Okay, I don't believe that was a question. I think that was a commentary to some extent, so I will sit down.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, recognized senator from the 44th District.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to yield for a question.
Thank you.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you very much. Last year, me and my team in District 44, we received information about a data center coming to our community, and trying to figure out where exactly to go to get additional information and to try to understand what was going on proved really difficult. So I'm wondering, within this bill, it's my understanding that there is no process for communities to be notified or anything?
Okay, I'll yield to your seatmate. I would say that this is very important. We are creating a registry. I mean, this is very bold. And this registry, where data centers who want to come after at some point have to disclose a lot of information that will be very helpful on multiple fronts. And I would also add, among the things, back to ratepayer impacts that hadn't been mentioned yet, is if a data center is applying to be sited in multiple states, that is problematic. It's something called the phantom load issue, where, you know, PJM and the capacity markets are taking into account is though that they're going to be actually locating and operating in multiple states, when in fact they're just putting applications in all over the place. So anyway, this back to your point, the registry is very thorough, very bold. This is something that we put in on the the Triple E committee put on the Senate side. That's not in the House bill. And your seatmate, the senator from District 9, probably can tell you a lot more about what's in that portion of the bill, particularly the registry, which addresses, I think, pretty directly the question you raise.
The senator raised.
I'm sorry, that the senator, my good friend, the senator raises.
And I understand the registry. I was asking more about community notification and communities when they would know that something might be coming, not necessarily what's in the registry and what and what you had spoken about.
Okay, what Senator could yield, because I believe that is actually addressed also in that portion of the bill dealing with the topic of data centers, community input, community involvement, notifications, and the like.
Recognized senator from District 9.
This is so strange.
It's good for the broader discussion. So that is why all comments are through the chair, because despite sitting next to one another, this is public debate.
Should I get on the phone?
That's kind of funny.
No, I appreciate the senator's question. I think that there is a slight difference, though, between what is in this bill and the question that he's asking, colleagues. I think, in the bill, we've got this registry process, which will get some information quite early to the PSC. It will be confidential until they aggregate it and produce a report. What I believe your question was, Senator, was about how you might know that there was a data center coming to your district, and what would be the earliest point. Based on an email exchange that I've seen with MDE, it appears that there is no formal notification that you might receive, but that they think that there could be some of the permits that the local planning department might have that would give an indication that said facility was coming to your district. But there is unfortunately nothing in that bill that would require that transparency. It's all handled at the local level through the local planning process.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Senator. All right, question is on the favorable report as amended. Further discussion of the amended report. Further discussion of the amended report. Any objections? Without objection. Oh, yes, Senator from the 42nd.
I have an amendment to offer.
Oh, yes. Let's take up the report. Any objections to the adoption of the amended report? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Senator from the 42nd District has an amendment. That is quite the amendment, apparently.
Yes.
Looks like a barbell.
It's an extremely lengthy amendment, but really it boils down to 2 sentences.
All right. The tree that was killed for that amendment disagrees, but
yeah. It's very long, but the relevant part of the amendment is on page 16. It says, the
Senator-
governor shall immediately begin the process of withdrawing the state from participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And then the second sentence, within 30 days after receiving notice that the state is withdrawn from participation in RGGI, the governor shall report to the General Assembly in accordance with section 2-1002G6 of the Environment Article. So it's very simple to explain. If this amendment passes, Maryland will begin the process of withdrawing from RGGI. So I could engage in a lengthy full colloquy, but in the interest of time, I will not. I will simply explain why I think the amendment's necessary. So RGGI, for those few people who don't know what it is a multi-state program that imposes massive costs on electricity generators and then ultimately the ratepayers. Electricity generation in Maryland is a huge industry, and RGGI imposes a cost which is in the neighborhood of 50% on the generation of electricity. As a result, the generators of electricity cannot possibly eat the cost of RGGI. Instead, they pass it along to Maryland residents and Maryland businesses in the form of much higher electricity prices. If you wonder why our electricity bills are so high, RGGI is largely responsible. Maryland residents and businesses should not be forced to pay a state-imposed tax embedded in their electricity rates, especially when family budgets are stretched so thin these days, largely attributable to large electricity bills. So RGGI is a program that for years has functioned as a hidden tax on every Marylander who pays an electric bill. RGGI requires power producers to buy carbon allowances, and those costs are passed directly to Maryland ratepayers. As a result, residential and commercial electricity bills have risen steadily, while RGGI revenues continue to grow. RGGI states are consistently among the highest cost electricity states in the country. Most of them are the New England states. And until recently, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has backed out. Pennsylvania has left RGGI. There are bills currently pending in both New Jersey and Delaware to take those states out of RGGI. And Maryland should leave RGGI too. I want to finish with just a personal story. A year ago, I did a lot of research on electricity as a result of this power line that's coming through my district. It's going to stretch 67 miles across Maryland. And to say the least, my constituents are extremely upset about it. So I began to delve into the electricity issues. And what I found was startling, and I resulted in 4 lengthy email reports to my constituents about what's going on, in which I tried to distill all the information I'd come up with. As a result of those emails, I received a telephone call from a fellow who said, could I come down and see you in Annapolis? He came down to visit me and identified himself. He lives in Baltimore. He's the chairman of the board of one of the 5 largest energy companies in the country. They have facilities in most other states, but not in Maryland. And during our conversation, I said, the Brandon Shores facility is scheduled to close down in 2029. Why doesn't your company buy Brandon Shores, convert it to natural gas, right now it's coal, and then continue to generate electricity there? Maryland desperately needs more electricity. His response to me was, we've run these numbers up one side and down the other side again and again. It simply doesn't pencil out. We can't figure out how, if we came into Maryland, we would ever recover the money that we invest, much less achieve a reasonable rate of return. And I said, well, what is our biggest problem? And he said, it's RGGI. He said, because of RGGI, you've made Maryland uneconomical to invest in. So because of that personal story, as well as for the facts I said earlier, I believe that this amendment is well warranted, and I would recommend it to the body. I intend to vote green on it. Thank you.
And Senator, just before you said we've had a couple questions. The acronym RGGI.
Oh, I'm sorry. Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Thank you very much. All right. Recognizing the senators move the amendment. Floor leader on the amendment.
Yeah, several things. Although some of the colloquy I had with the minority whip, sort of address some of this. I would make the point that we had a piece of legislation in the committee to do exactly what the amendment did. That particular bill did not gain traction. We had an amendment offered during voting session on this exact same subject. That amendment was rejected, and so this is a bit of the third crack at the, so to speak. As I said earlier, first of all, the idea that most of the states are New England states is not correct. I mentioned the fact that Virginia this past month voted in the General Assembly to get back into RGGI. Delaware and New Jersey, best I checked, are not considered New England states. And in terms of where the RGGI money goes, the money comes from fossil fuel companies that are producing, again, 25 megawatts or more. It's that the monies that are, as a result of auctions, 90% of that money gets redeployed to the states, including the state of Maryland. And what do we do with that 90%? We deploy it to a large extent to our low-income folks to help them on their energy bills. We fund the Maryland Energy Administration almost entirely through RGGI money. The so-called PPRP, the Plant Power Research Program, which is responsible for doing a lot of the work related to new energy projects, gets a lot of their money from RGGI, and on and on and on. And as I said earlier, as far as this idea that there's this clear nexus between RGGI and participating in RGGI along with the 11 other states and energy bills, again, we have the studies, Brattle and others from Berkeley, that say that it's not a cost driver because a lot of the money also goes into energy efficiency, which again helps on the demand side, so that it's not a driver of energy costs. What it does also help with is our greenhouse gas emissions. All the states cumulatively since the inception of RGGI have seen a 50%, Mr. President, a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, which is good for the folks of our state who have respiratory and asthma problems and the like. So there's a multiple set of reasons, and maybe that's why Virginia voted to go back into RGGI, that are very highly beneficial for our state. And again, at this third crack at the apple, so to speak, I would urge the body to resist this amendment, as we did in committee and as we did not take action on the underlying bill. So with that, Mr. President, I will yield back to you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. I recognize the Senator from 35th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. We heard a third crack at the apple. I hope it's a third time is a charm, is the way this will work out. My main question with this amendment, will it help save Maryland ratepayers money on their energy bills? And I believe it will. The Brattle Group has been mentioned several times. We had that in committee and it was brought up. And I really just started to kind of dig into that group a little bit because their studies are what are being quoted as saying it basically will not. So I kind of looked up in Open Secrets. If you looked the individual members and family members from this Brattle organization who they donate money to, overwhelmingly Liga Conservation, LCV Victory Fund, last election cycle $42,000, which is concerning. I don't think the LCV Victory Fund or these folks that work for Brattle are concerned about saving Maryland ratepayers money on their bills. They have other things that they're worried about. So I believe this amendment will indeed save our Maryland ratepayers. That's who I'm concerned about. So I would encourage my colleagues to vote green on this amendment and also do it via a roll call, please.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, recognize Senator from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. One thing that I think we should all emphasize and what we've talked about many times over is affordability. It's one of the biggest concerns we have in our nation, let alone in our state. And in the wintertime and in certain times of the season, I'm very happy that we always are able to help the less fortunate. We need to always help them out because in places, people need more help than others, and that's very understandable. But I think about the middle class, Mr. President. When's the last time the middle class got a real break? When have we really given something to them? When have we really reached out and helped our middle class? the heart of our nation, why we are so different, because of the middle class, Mr. President. We are so different. That's why we're unique. That's why we're called the United States of America, because we have a middle class, and we do well in that. Why can't we do something like this, Mr. President, and bring a real relief to our people? This will be inserted, and it would automatically give them a relief. 90 days we're here. Let's find something that is going to help out our middle class. Help out the people that are working hard at the steel plants, at Bethlehem Steel, at the Port of Baltimore, throughout our state. They're asking us to remedy this. We're not going to do that. But can we help out in some way? I think this is a start. Let's cut back their utility bills. Let's find a better way to work for our people and our constituents. Let's vote green. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, recognize the minority whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to speak quickly on giving relief to our ratepayers. I quoted earlier on the RGGI cost approximately $9 to $12 more per megawatt hour in RGGI states for natural gas power production than non-RGGI states. That amounts to between 25 to 50% of the cost. So this is a huge cost. So not only does this add money every month to your constituents and my constituents' bills for negligible benefit relative to the environment, it also discourages energy production in the state, which also adds costs long term. That's one of the reasons we're so expensive in Maryland, is we have to import 40% of our energy. And so here's the thing. Virginia's joining. Other states have refused to join. Pennsylvania not going. Virginia's vertically integrated with their power system, so there's a little bit of a difference there as well. But the idea that we can't take a pause, getting out of this would be a great opportunity. Get out of it and see what happens. Get out of it and see what happens. Energy is more expensive in RGGI states than it is in non-RGGI states. That's just like, it's there, it's fact. But if you think there's all these, if you don't agree with that, if we got out of it, even temporarily for a couple of years, let's look at what would happen, and we can watch what happens in Virginia. Guarantee you Virginia's electric rates are going to be higher. They're going to be higher by joining RGGI. Our folks are really suffering, and I heard about how RGGI funds some of these other things and programs, and I'm sure there's good things that they fund, but I looked at Maryland Energy Administration. One of the things that's funded is MEA. MEA's goals are there to promote clean, affordable, reliable energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which is not, we haven't reduced significantly, and lower energy bills for Marylanders. Well, we're doing a bang-up job because that's not happening. It's gotten worse. And all of the emissions changes since 2006, we hit some very ambitious goals. We had they were goals for 2025, I believe, we set in 2006. And we actually came pretty much and hit those goals. You know why? Because we went from coal to natural gas, these GHG emissions. Well, now we're saying we've gotten to where we don't want natural gas anymore because it's the so-called fossil fuel. And it's driving the cost more and more and more. Support this amendment. This is a cut my constituents' bills amendment. I'm voting green.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the senator from the, well, are there any senators who have not yet spoken on the amendment that wish to speak? If not, recognize the senator from the 42nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to stand up and speak again. However, something has happened that I can never recall happening previously in my legislative career, and I just think it's wrong. And I'm getting old. My memory isn't what it used to be. It may have happened previously, and I just don't remember it. I just received an email from a major advocacy organization stating that my vote on this bill was going to be scored on their legislative report card. That arrived 2 minutes ago on my legislative computer. I suspect everybody else got the same email. I just think it's wrong, and I wanted to stand up and protest it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the minority leader.
Yeah, Mr. President, I got that same email from Maryland LCV. I think that's League of Conservation Voters. League of Conservation Voters opposes the amendment currently presented on the floor, so I guess they're watching, to remove Maryland from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Votes on this proposal, so that everybody knows, if they're concerned, Mr. President, votes on this proposal will be considered scorable on our annual legislative scorecard. If you have any questions, you can call Rebecca or Kristen. Mr. President, I would agree with my colleague. This is somewhat unheard of. You know, I mean, I recognize that there is free speech and people are able to communicate the way they are, but that almost seems threatening. And that almost seems threatening to tell people and to make sure that as this amendment is being offered, that this environmental advocacy group is out there saying, hey, don't do this because we'll score you negatively if you vote in favor of that. And, you know, if they want to put these things out as they're preparing for bills and they show up at bill hearings like everybody else, that's one thing. But to threaten voters in here, to threaten members in this chamber on how they vote and whether or not something will be scorable, I just think is extremely inappropriate. And I think that deserves some kind of comment back to this organization.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yes, I recognize the senator from the 14th district.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My wife just texted me and said I should be voting against this amendment. No, I'm teasing. But look, I think we're part of what we do in the state of Maryland, especially Senate, is transparency. Everything's we have live streaming, so people are going to advocate. I think it's what we try to do is we try to. Based on our judgment, based on our wisdom, what we think is best for the state of Maryland, and I think we should just stick to the facts of what this amendment does.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from District 9.
Yes, colleagues, since its launch in 2009, RGGI has cut carbon pollution by approximately 50% across participating states. And this program has enormous co-benefits, which are valued at $5.7 billion. Maryland alone has received more than $1 billion in revenue through the RGGI auctions. And that is exactly why I'm be voting for this amendment. Against.
Clarifying. All right. Senator from the 45th district.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, I just want to lean in and say thank you to the committee for the committee work. One of the things that I recognize when we think about the middle class part of it is just the prevailing wage language that I saw within that component. And just thinking about making sure that the folks that do work on these projects, that not only will they be making a good wage, but they'll also have affordable health care. Hopefully, when they retire after doing 30, 40 years of work, be able to retire with dignity. So I do thank the committee in reference to that piece of it, and that's why I'll be voting against the amendment.
All right, thank you, Senator. Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Does anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 29 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Further amendments to the bill are to recognize the minority whip. Has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Yes, this is it. Thank you.
We want to thank the House pages who are here watching the debate. I hope you all are having a great week. We appreciate you all for being here. Thanks for stopping by. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we talked earlier about the terrible trio of programs that from the perspective of who has to pay the bill are terrible, really difficult. Let's call it the tough trio. I'm still working on the acronyms, Mr. President. There's 3 government programs, 3 policy choices that the state of Maryland has made. RGGI, which we just talked about, and this one is Empower. And I appreciate the committee's acknowledgement and the General Assembly's acknowledgement that Empower is a problem that adds cost to everybody's bills, and that the way to get some relief immediately is to adjust the Empower program. Once again, similar to our RGGI argument, but this is actually a little easier to pause this, and this amendment would pause Empower. So let's go all the way with it for the pause. It would allow for payments to continue to projects that have already been encumbered, obviously. So we're not going to, the utility companies can still recoup for projects that have been happening. But this would save we estimate this would save every ratepayer in Maryland around an average of $17 a month, just this amendment alone, by pausing Empower. And here's the thing, Empower, I know there's been some stories recently in the media about businesses and groups that promote and sell these products and help install them in people's homes. And I think I don't begrudge anybody for taking advantage of policy decisions and trying to make sure that their business markets these products. But what we're at now is that the Empower program, the idea was that you would really be investing in big projects that could help improve energy efficiency and really help bring down overall costs. But we're taking money out. We're taking about $21 on average a month out of everybody's bill. Some people it's a lot more than that, depending on usage. We're taking at least $21 a month on average out of everybody's bill for this program. That now we're at the point where it's like, hey, maybe we can do a grant so some folks can change out some of the stuff in their house. Well, that's not something the government should be taking money from everybody every month to do. It's just not right. This would be a great, sensible amendment that would add some real additional savings into the bill. So it would pause Empower fully. And again, you can always start things back up in the future. But right now we're in an emergency crisis situation. And so I would urge the body to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any senators move the amendment? Recognize the floor leader.
Yeah, do we have enough people here in the chamber? Okay, yeah. Okay, two things. First of all, the pause is in perpetuity. I mean, it's not like a 3 or 4 year pause. This basically deletes, gets rid of the Empower program. And so just by way of a little, and I may not have mentioned this earlier, Mr. President, it has been a super successful program overall. In 2022, there was a report for every $1 spent, $1.61 in benefits. Then there was a subsequent report in 2023 for every dollar spent on Empower. It brought back to in energy efficiencies and benefits $2.21, et cetera, et cetera. We had testimony about how important this has not been discussed a lot from small businesses and contractors who, hundreds of small businesses who make their living through the Empower program. And they did testify to the effect that at that time they could live with the reduction in the greenhouse gas emission goals, but if you were going to go doing some long pause, it would put out hundreds of small business literally out of business. And so I don't know where the minority whip got his dollar figure, in terms of a pause for some years. It's not very much at all. You have to weigh the pros and cons. This actually, that's a super blunt instrument. What we're trying to do here is maintain the Empower program, but also reap the benefits of the Empower program. And so yes, we're reducing the greenhouse gas emission goals. We are keeping it going. And this particular amendment basically just obliterates the Empower program, which has been, since its inception in 2008, very successful from a cost-benefit equation. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I would urge the body to vote red on this amendment.
All right. On the amendment, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, recognize the maker of the amendment.
First of all, Mr. President, I ask for a roll call on this. Secondly, I'll tell you what's a super blunt instrument is government mandated programs that take money out of everybody's bill every month with a growing amounts in a time when we're facing a crisis. Once again, it's an example, if we don't accept this amendment, it's another example of government, Maryland state government, not willing to take a haircut ever when people are facing difficult circumstances in our state. Our high cost of living, we raise taxes, we raise fees. We come back this session, hey, congrats, we didn't raise any taxes or fees, but we spent the money we raised from you, and hey, we have an opportunity here to maybe pause a program, and we could come back anytime and pass it again. To say it's in perpetuity, well, we can come back anytime and reinstate a program. This is the blunt instrument is state government adding cost to everybody's bill for months and months and years and years and years. And now when we're in a crisis, not being willing to just roll some of this back more permanently and more decidedly to give people real savings. And it's wrong, Mr. President. We should support this amendment. And as I said, this is a great example of a program it's really run its course from a large scale place. We could take a break from it. Of course, the pause is permanent, but you could come back and pass it again anytime and start it up again. Mr. President, I move the amendment.
All right. On the amendment, if there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 23 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Further, recognize the minority leader has another amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are the best and easiest type of amendments that you can offer. This amendment simply changes four numbers in our policy and will save Maryland families about $300 million a year. Very, very simple bill. I don't know if you have to wait for emails or anybody to tell you how to vote on this. I'm going to give you a suggestion and tell you that if you want to leave here in Annapolis this year and say, I saved Maryland ratepayers $300 million a year, you can simply say that you voted for this amendment. And how do I know it's $300 million a year? Well, because, as the chair said, sometimes amendments here were once bills in the committee. And this bill in its entirety is filled with a number of bills that were in committee that didn't have their own vote, but somehow made it into this piece of legislation. So yes, I did offer this amendment in the form of a bill in committee this year, and I respect and appreciate the chair for acknowledging and welcome me into that committee to explain this. But let me tell you what it does, because it's very simple. Maryland has a renewable energy portfolio standard, and that says that suppliers of electricity must get a certain amount of that from renewable energy eligible sources, okay? So it has to come from renewable sources. And those sources that are eligible to compete in what is called, this is about the Tier 1 RECs, are solar, wind, biomass, methane, geothermal, ocean, fuel cells, hydroelectric power, poultry litter to energy, and raw and treat, a number of things that you have never heard of, okay? And that's the point of this bill, is that those types of eligible generating resources are not abundant. There is not enough of them to make up the very aggressive goals that the RRPS has. So this essentially rebalances the RPS goals with the amount of eligible generating sources that are out there. And why does this become necessary? Well, over the last 3 years, we eliminated 2 of the largest eligible generating sources in the state. One was black liquor, and that was specifically targeted at a facility up in Western Maryland, Luke Mill facility. The General Assembly decided to take away black liquor. Subsequently, Luke Mill went out of business. They were not able to see those benefits anymore. The next is what we did just last year, is we removed waste to energy from the RPS. So again, no longer could a facility in Montgomery County and Baltimore City receive RECs for renewable energy sources. So it took those 2 big sources out of the ability to reach our goals. So now our goals need to be addressed as well. Our goals need to be changed. And this simply does that. It reduces for the next 3 years, because that's how far the RPS goals go to. It reduces the goals for our Tier 1 RPS, not by a lot, but by about 30%. Okay, so the RPS still remains in place. It doesn't reduce it by a lot, it just reduces it by about 30%. And what that will end up doing is allowing, as we've talked about several times already today, allowing the suppliers to go out and purchase RECs, to go out and find enough RECs that meet these new goals, and that prevents them from having to pay the ACP payments. So it's a very simple process. It simply, again, changes 4 numbers in our policy. It recognizes the same way that we took out waste to energy and the same way that we took out black liquor, that we have to make changes in our policies as times change. We have to make changes in our goals. Our goals cannot be the same if we take away eligible generating sources. So with that, Mr. President, I would ask that the body join me in a roll call to reduce ratepayer energy bills by $300 million immediately. Thank you.
All right. Senator moves the amendment. Recognize the floor leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, we did have a full-blown bill hearing on this very amendment in the committee, and the bill did not move. And I would say the reason is, it is true, Mr. President, that last session we did take up the waste to energy incineration part of Tier 1, and we made a policy call that did not, at this point, constitute clean energy for purposes of the renewable portfolio standard. And that was a judgment call we made policy-wise last session. But the decision last year or the year before on that should not impact some of the virtues and some of the benefits of why we want to still have a renewable portfolio standard system program that builds on wanting to have more geothermal, solar, offshore wind, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that we made a policy call on one part of Tier 1, 1 year or 2 years, does not alter the fact that we still should have these goals in place, and that is one of the reasons that the bill that was heard in the committee did not get traction, and I would urge the body to resist this amendment, which is a pretty major, a very major, significant policy call on the floor. For those of you who were not, didn't have the benefit of the bill hearing, this is a major call. So again, I urge the body to go red on this amendment. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, recognizing the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And in recognizing, yes, there was a policy call made, not just last year, but 3 years before that as well, when we took out black liquor. The problem was, in making those policy goals, we did not adjust the goals. And again, these goals are very arbitrary. They came in and we had bill hearings on it, and probably the same group that's out there sending emails right now telling everybody how to vote probably came in and testified and told people how to vote in getting our RPS to 50% by 2030, because that's where we are right now. This amendment does not eliminate the RPS. It just adjusts the goals to be more in line with what type of generating sources are available to retire Tier 1 RECs. So, Mr. President, let's also remember a number of years ago, we also had, I think it was called the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And I think that's the bill that brought the RPS goals up to 50% by 2030. Big part of that bill, again, in order to get the support that was needed to pass it, was to bring in the jobs aspect, right? We had to bring in and said, okay, we're going to do prevailing wage or organize that labor was going to be able to get all these energy projects that we're going to be creating as a result of this projects. And that might be true if you are working on a wind farm in Illinois or Indiana or Ohio, then you're the benefactor of subsidies being provided by Maryland ratepayers, because that's where all these projects are that are retiring the RECs to meet our goals. So by not changing the goals with the policies, we've in sense given ratepayer money to projects that are out of state. The only projects that we're seeing in state that are meeting our RPS standards are solar, because they have to. That's got a carve out though. That's got its own goals that we're not getting to. But solar has to be in state, and everything else, with the excepted geothermal and some other small things, can be done out of state, within the PJM region. That's where Maryland ratepayer money is going. That's where our subsidies are going. They're going out of state. Yes, we have a few wind farms out in western Maryland, and we've got a hydroelectric dam in Deep Creek and Conowingo. Everything else that is done that we are paying for is going out of state. And it continues to go out of state because we have these unachievable goals. So again, this simply, it's not a major policy decision, as we just heard. It's just a rebalancing of some prior decisions that we made to bring it more in line to make the goals achievable. With that, Mr. President, again, I'm supporting the amendment. I hope to get green votes. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 30th District, followed by the Senator from the 37th District.
I have a question. I'm sorry, the 37th. you said?
Oh, no, 30. Oh, yes,
30th.
30th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the maker of the amendment.
Will the maker of the amendment yield?
Yes.
Senator may proceed.
Are you referencing Senate Bill 706 when you talked about the committee considering it in committee?
Yes, I am.
I'm reading the fiscal note and I'm trying to understand if the last portion of it is, I'm trying to decipher the last portion. In the fiscal note for that one, it says, beginning in compliance year 2027, the significant reduction in the state's Tier 1 RPS requirements is likely to result in a decrease in electricity rates, reflecting reduced ACP expenditures by electricity suppliers relative to current law. Electricity rates may also decrease to the extent that the bill results in lower REC prices. Holding other factors constant, a decrease in the state's Tier 1 RPS requirements decreases the demand for Tier 1 RECs and thus exerts downward pressure on REC prices. While a reliable estimate of the potential decrease in REC prices cannot be made, any decrease in the REC prices will proportionally reduce compliance costs and ultimately consumer rates. Is it saying that if the standards were lowered, like you've proposed in the amendments, that utility bills would go down?
I couldn't have read that any better. Thank you very much, because absolutely that's correct. Utility bills will not only go down because suppliers will not have to buy as many RECs, and two, the suppliers that cannot meet the REC requirement would not have to pay as much in ACP payments, which again are passed on to consumers. So that's why when we looked at the fiscal note, it came back exactly what you said. It would drive down bill rates for electric payers.
Okay. Did it give any estimate of about how much those rates, in accordance with the proposal of the amendment, with the reduced standards as proposed in the amendment, did it indicate how much the rates would reduce in the average utility bill?
It did not go into the amount per bill as we've been talking about so long, as I've talked about earlier today. You know, you can look in absolute numbers and say that, you know, eliminating employee compensation will generate, you know, $20 million. Requiring a public utility to be a member of a RTO would save $20 million. Then somehow some indication is happening that says this amounts to this much per saving per month, okay? And that's what we're hearing from most of the talking points. As you've referenced into this fiscal note, it doesn't go to that standard on what it is per month, but what it does say is hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And that's actually why I asked the chairman the question earlier. If last year we were able to say that $200 million in ratepayer relief equated to $40 twice or $80 a year, essentially with $300 million equate to $120 annually or $10 a month. So you're going to have to make that type of calculation based on, you know, a number to try to get a monthly savings. But when you talk about $300 million potentially in savings, because that's how much money is being paid through the alternative compliance payments, that's the type of number that this would entail. That's the type of savings.
I appreciate it. I've tried my best to follow the topic and follow the committee's amendments, and it's my first time seeing this amendment, so I'm trying my best to understand and digest all of that in real time. So I appreciate the genuine answer.
I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I recognize the senator from the 37th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question for the floor leader for the amendment.
Will the floor leader yield? Senator may proceed.
So I've had the great honor of serving in the General Assembly for a few years, but not as long as the floor leader. And do you recall when the RPS was created?
2012, 24. I know it's about 25 years old, so somewhere in that reference, because we've had a number of conversations on, do we have to reevaluate that? And it always, I mean, I can remember, you know, under two previous chairmen in the Senate Finance Committee where we had energy policy for many years, that it was discussed then. So it's been around quite a while.
So I've been told that the RPS was created to jumpstart renewable energy and to be a temporary program. Is that accurate? Was it just created to be a temporary program?
Well, I think that's what you do any type of subsidies for. So if you're going to subsidize, you know, a business or an industry you would put subsidies in place to kind of get it going, to get it, get it off the ground and have it moving forward. But at some time, for many reasons, you want to scale back the subsidies. And usually, if you look at us, you would scale back those subsidies and place them somewhere else. So you might say, okay, we started this with renewable sources. We've made some major changes to the RPS, as I said earlier, by eliminating some of the eligible generating sources. But what we really should do, should we refocus some of those dollars elsewhere? And we've tried to with bringing in other sources. We brought in geothermal a number of years ago. We put its own carve out there. But what we're seeing is it's just not getting the type of subsidies we need because we continue to subsidize solar at such a great expense.
And I've seen a number of changes in the RPS, but on a percentage scale, are you aware of any time it's ever been reduced? Is it? Because in my experience, it's always been an increase in timing of goals and percentages and things like that. Has it ever been reduced?
No, again, but the advocacy groups would never allow that to happen. I mean, that's what ends up happening when you're looking at this policy. It's driven by environmental advocacy groups, as we've seen before, that just want to see talking points. I mean, that's what this is really about. Their goal when it came to the Clean Energy Jobs Act a few years ago was 50% by 2030. That's all they talked about. Whether that was achievable or not, that doesn't matter. Okay, what they want is the talking points to say Maryland is going to be 50% renewables by 2030. How they get there, how we get there, and what it costs is of no concern to those groups. They just want the talking points. And so, yes, we've always seen the goals have increased. We've never, ever see them decrease.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my questions. And I just want to speak on the amendment.
Thank you.
The amendment.
Senator may proceed.
So the amendment, you've heard about the RPS and the history of the RPS, and you've heard how it's grown because of the stakeholders and the advocates. Our advocates are our constituents and our voters. And this amendment addresses the interests of the true advocates, the people that really matter, the people we're representing, and it's going to save them $300 million. And sometimes when you look in the mirror and say, how do we get here? We've got a major problem. How do we get here? The RPS is a great example of cost on energy bills. And this is a very simple amendment. I hope folks would take the time to really think about this because it doesn't kill the RPS. All it does is scale things back a little bit during a really tough time. It's a great amendment, and I urge everyone to vote for it. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, further discussion. We sure? If we could ring the bells. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Whew. With 22 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Recognizing the minority whip.
Well, Mr. President, if you'd taken that one, we could have stopped, but we're going to keep going. Not too late to change the vote.
Pages will
that would have been a good one.
Distribute the amendment.
That would have really helped tax ratepayers. Oh, well, we'll keep going here. This amendment, oh, wait a minute, sorry.
Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment is we've talked a lot about ratepayers and we've been talking about RPS. This amendment, I think, is a really good one, and it's pretty simple. It would remove what is currently an in-state restriction on solar in Tier 1 in the RPS. This amendment would have the effect of reducing the cost for the RECs and the RPS by allowing us to just go and buy solar from anywhere. Right now, there's nothing else in Tier 1 has the same in-state restriction that you have to get it from in-state that solar does. I think a hydro actually does, but hydro's only a small little piece of Tier 1. So this amendment would very simply say you no longer have to get the solar that's Tier 1 from in-state. You could get it from anywhere. And honestly, I mean, I think in a perfect world, we would be using these things to to incentivize and grow local business, but it has not worked that way. And at this point, this is an opportunity. This would bring down costs and make it a little bit simpler to deal with for utility industry that as they buy tier 1 RECs. So I move the amendment, Mr. President.
All right, senators move the amendment. Check with the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, I said the last bill was a pretty major. This is a huge, even far on steroids, big policy call. There was no standalone bill at all. The implications of this are significant. And again, had no bill hearing, no standalone. This would most likely, well, I will only say that this should be a standalone bill with bill hearing, with fiscal note impacts, with industry implications. We have none of that information here before us, and so for that reason alone, Mr. President, I would urge the body to put a red vote up on the board. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? Recognize the minority leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd support the amendment. We've done a lot of policy changes in here to promote the growth of the solar industry, and this would do just that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in Maryland anymore for us to be able to say that we want to see solar growing and coming that industry going. The interesting thing with this is that the REC prices would change, and I think that's the important part. Rather than just having the SRECs, which are the tier 1 solar RECs, the non tier 1 solar RECs would probably start to settle down a little bit more and be more in line with what the solar industry would be looking to achieve. So, it actually expands it. And with respect to the remaining part of the RPS, we allow generating sources from outside the state of Maryland. This is the only one that's focused that has to be in the state. So, this is an opportunity to continue to promote solar, but to be able to essentially also meet the RPS goals and thus reduce the ACP payments and the higher cost of electricity. So again, I would support this amendment.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion on the amendment? Any senators who have not yet spoken, recognize the maker of the amendment. Senators request a roll call vote. If there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 22 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Recognized senator from District 7 has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment deals with an issue that came before my district. And in fairness, kind of as the chairman had talked about, whether or not something had time to be heard in the committee. This actually was a standalone bill that I put in. It was also an amendment that was offered in committee yesterday. But I listened to the hearing of that, the presentation of the amendment as it was offered, and I took from the discussion of the amendment some of the opposition to it and struck that from the original amendment that was offered. And let me explain what this amendment does and walk you through what happened in my district. So in Maryland, we have two major transmission lines that are looking to be put in. We have one in northern Baltimore County, which is called the Maryland Piedmont Reliable Project. And in that one, what happened was notice was given to all the landowners by the organization that's putting that in. And what it did by doing that is those landowners now have an opportunity to intervene if they feel that they would like to be part of the actual court proceedings, anything that's taking place on that. And it was fair to the property owners, the landowners, that they were given notification. Unlike the other project that I'm dealing with in my district, which is called the Brandon Shores Retirement Mitigation Project,
the notice that was consented by by a BGE was pretty much nothing more than a Baltimore Sun advertisement and a website posting and a couple social media postings. That was not given information to the landowners. Nothing was sent to the elected officials. Nobody knew about this until it was too late. So nobody had any chance to intervene, become an intervener in the any type of court proceedings. And it took a lot of pressure, a lot of work with the elected officials afterwards to be able to give notice to say, hey, that's not right. And we're able to finally get to that point. So what this amendment does is it requires notice be given once these projects move forward. It's a pretty simple amendment. It's what's fair to these people that are going to have to deal with these transmission lines coming through their property, that they're given notice when this takes place. And, you know, Mr. President, it's, again, simple, it's fair, it's what's right for the property owners. It's making it fair to the entire process. So with that, I move favorable on the amendment.
All right, Senator has moved the amendment. Let's hear from the floor leader.
Okay, well, I appreciate the amendment. I'd urge the body to resist the amendment for the following reasons. We did have this particular amendment in its original, there was an amendment that the committee rejected, then it was modified to be exactly aligned with what this amendment does, and the committee also voted against that amendment. And the reason is that under current law, the Public Service Commission already has the required to provide notice or require the applicant, the transmission line owner, to provide notice immediately. That's current law. So they can do it, the Public Service Commission, or they can delegate to the transmission line owner. Once the application's before the PSC, the Public Service Commission may notify communities. They may delegate that, as I said, to the transmission line owners. This is important. The Public Service Commission is the one that reviews the notice, the list of persons in the communities that the proper notice is to be given to. The Public Service Commission also gives notice to state and local representatives, so that the state and local representatives, like ourselves, may also ensure that their communities are being notified. And so, bottom line is the Public Service Commission is the best able in the best position when in the process to give the notification, who to send the notices to, and under certain circumstances is absolutely empowered to let the transmission line owners do that notice. What this amendment does is it takes the Public Service Commission entirely out of the process, which is highly problematic because they're the ones that really should be and are in the best position to do the notification, or as they say, if it makes sense, they have the authority to delegate. So this amendment is unnecessary, and taking the PSC entirely out of the process, I think, is again problematic. For those reasons, Mr. President, I'd urge the body to resist this particular amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any senators who wish to speak on the amendment that have not yet spoken? If not, maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I see the amendment differently. I don't see this taking the PSC out of it. I see on page 2, or at the bottom here, the second paragraph, the commission shall provide or direct the person applying for the certificate. So it's still on the PSC to determine, hey, are we going to do it, or are we going to push it to the actual developer? So to me, this amendment still, it keeps it within the PSC. It's up to the discretion of the PSC to say, hey, it's our responsibility, or you know what, we're going to push it to the developer. But what it does lay out is all the responsibilities of who has to be notified, whether or not they're, each owner of the land that abuts the property, where the construction is planned, and it walks through all the processes. Again, I think the senator from District 42 talked about 67 miles that's being ripped up through Maryland. All those people had a process where they were notified. My district, 30-some acres, nobody was notified. This is going to happen in the future. We're dealing with we're talking about data centers. This isn't the last time this is going to happen. All this is saying is, as we move forward, make sure we have the process written in law of how it's done. And it keeps the PSC in here. It's right here, page 2, bottom paragraph. It's up to the commission, shall provide, or they will then direct the developer. So I disagree with the chairman on taking the PSC out of it. So I'll push again for the amendment.
All right, We'll hear from the senator from the 42nd who's not yet spoken, then we'll go back to the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reiterate or reinforce what the senator just said. In my district, notice was given to the landowners along the 67 miles. I have never in my 12 years in legislative experience, seen what happened then. It was almost like a bomb went off. We had public meetings in very large high school auditoriums totally packed. Another meeting was in Westminster at the Agricultural Center, a huge facility under roof. The place was packed. And one of these meetings occurred the second day of school. And you would think people would be home with their kids because the kids had no, the room was packed. I've never seen such a reaction, and it's only because people got notice. If they had not received notice and had learned about this after the fact, as is the case with the people in the district that the maker of the amendment is referring to, the antagonism, the fury would have been absolutely irresistible for elected officials in the district. This is an important amendment. It doesn't cost anything. It's vitally important in these situations that the people who are going to be affected have notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We'll hear from the floor leader, followed by the senator from the 35th district.
Yes. The maker of the amendment indicated that the amendment that we resisted or rejected in committee, that this does not include the most problematic part of the amendment, which is D1. And so what it says is that the entire public hearing process is invalidated if, for example, one or two people didn't get the right notice at some point, and so the project would literally have to get started all over again, which could end up after a lot of money and resources. So this word invalidated it was a problematic term in the committee, and it's still in this particular amendment that's being proffered by the gentleman from District 7. And so invalidating the entire process, all the money that's been spent on a project because a couple of folks somewhere along the line didn't get the right notice is very, again, problematic on multiple levels. And so for that reason as well, I'd urge the body to put a red vote on the board. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Senator. The senator from the 35th, we'll go back to.
I'd just like to rise to speak in favor of this amendment. You know, this is good for transparency. You know, I noticed the part about, you know, getting this out certified mail, but when you rely, you're talking about, well, about the PSC, this process did not work the way it is for the people in the senator from District 7's district. So this amendment is a good attempt to try to keep that from happening again. We've located a problem. His constituents were affected by it. Some of the folks I know as well from his district. So this is simply trying to make this more transparent and get it in the law so we don't have that happen again. That's what this amendment's about.
Thank you, Senator. Recognize Senator for maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to stand here and say that the problem with this amendment is that maybe some people didn't get notified and that we have to stop the process. It's easy to say here and dismiss them until you realize that that's somebody's farm. It's a farm that's been in the family for 100 years. It's somebody's family's home where they've raised their children. And to sit there and say to them, well, I'm sorry you didn't get notified, but tough luck. That's why we're down here, is to fight for our constituents. And just say, hey, you know what? This amendment can fix that to make sure they're notified properly and it's done the right way. I mean, it's simple. I'm just kind of disappointed that that's the attitude we're going to take towards trying to fight for our constituency, because it's going to happen in the future. There's going to be more power lines. People aren't going to be notified properly, and they're going to be calling each and every one of us saying, hey, you know what? I wasn't notified. They're taking our family farm. They're taking my home. They're going to be putting these transmission lines over our house. The cancer risk and all these risks that we're having, what can we do about it? And say, sorry, we had an amendment to fix it, but we just dismissed you. So with that, Mr. President, I'm voting yes, and I ask for a roll call.
All right. On the amendment, we'll recognize the senator from the 34th, then followed by the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the maker of the amendment answer a question? As
Senator
someone who
Baker,
owns a family farm,
yes, ma'am,
cares deeply about it, and would be greatly distressed if such a large tract of land was not properly notified. Can you just tell me what was the breakdown in your district? Because it sounds like notice went to some people in other senators' districts, but somehow, and I think this is in Hartford County,
Yeah.
or how was Hartford County forgotten, which it so often is?
No, they're two different projects. These were two different, absolutely two different projects. The project in District 42 is the Piedmont Reliability Project. It's being constructed by a different company that's the one that's taking power from Pennsylvania down to Virginia for the data centers. This one is the Brandon Shores Retirement Facility. It's the power plant down there just past what was the Key Bridge, down off the, it's in Anne Arundel County.
Yeah.
It's going to be shut down. They're adding another set of power lines through there. So it's two different.
Got it.
And the reason is the organization doing Piedmont handled it differently than BGE's handled it in my district.
To your knowledge, though, the lack of notice to your constituents was likely not deliberate or willful, but probably somehow negligent or an oversight is what I would imagine.
It's what they saw with regards to their interpretation of what was given to them of how they had to notify. They saw, hey, let's do it in the newspaper. We can do social media posts. And, it was the interpretation of what was required of them from the PSC of how to notify landowners is what they followed.
Because the reason I'm asking is that the chairman of the committee mentioned that one of the problems with your amendment is that it could invalidate the whole process, but that's modified by the fact that it has to be willful or deliberate.
Yes.
In other words, if it was not willful or deliberate, then you're not going to do your amendment is reasonable in that you then can go in the Public Service Commission has a fair amount of discretion to figure out how to proceed, but certainly then landowners would have an opportunity to participate once they were actually notified. They wouldn't just be run over by the
Yes.
lack of care, perhaps, that was
Yes.
engendered in this. And okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator. Senator from the 44th District.
Mr. President, what just happened was the conversation that was the information that I was interested in, just making certain that there was the idea of it being willful and deliberate, causing the invalidation, not just the lack of knowledge. And I guess the maker of amendment, I'm understanding that correctly, correct?
Yield to the.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, on the amendment. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Ooh. By a vote of 20 to 19, the amendment is adopted. All right, further amendments to the bill or its title? Recognize the senator from the 38th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was hoping to ask the Senate chamber if they can muster up a warm welcome for school students that I have from Worcester Preparatory, if they can stand. They've been up here. They came up actually right after we did introductions. They're from Berlin. These are our government students. They saw us in action earlier. They went and they did their tour. They've come back to see us in action, knowing that we're working hard on energy legislation to reduce costs for our ratepayers. I want to point out with these students that Worcester Prep community service students from every grade level, from K through 12, participate in learning, service, and activities on and off the campus. So go Fighting Mallards, and let's give them a warm welcome, please.
Welcome, welcome. The Fighting Mallards, did I catch that correctly? Fighting Mallards? That's excellent. The Mighty Ducks, the Fighting Mallards, love it. All right, yes, recognize the senator from the 23rd District has an amendment.
Yes, I do.
Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this was alluded to a little earlier. This is the amendment that makes it crystal clear when we're talking about the salaries we discuss. We're talking about executive officer, and it defines what that is. Executive officer means the president, vice president, senior officer responsible for a business operation, chief financial officer, or any other individual who performs similar functions. I'd like to move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. On the amendment, any, floor leader?
That's a friendly amendment, Mr.
Nope,
President.
friendly amendment from the committee. Any objections to the amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Further amendments to the bill or title. Recognize the senator from the 23rd District has another amendment. Page will
Another
collect
amendment.
and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, when we discussed this package, one of the things that I found we were a little deficient on is proper metrics. How are we measuring or capturing the information to know whether or not we are meeting our goals? What this bill does is requires the department to prepare an annual report on the greenhouse gas emission reductions achieved as a result of the adoption of electric vehicles in the state. We've pushed very, very hard for electric vehicles, and the whole purpose of electric vehicles was to reduce our carbon footprint. We just want a way to capture that. I'd like to move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Check with the floor leader.
Mr. President, that is a friendly amendment.
Very friendly, very friendly. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. All right. Recognize the senator from District 2 has an amendment. Page will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to keep this streak going here. I like this.
You never know. Send to Maryland.
That's right.
Any given day. Let's see. Give us
All
just
right.
a moment. Senator, just give us one moment to get it.
Yep.
Make sure we have the right one. All right. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what this amendment has to deal with is with line extension allowances. I'm sure everyone in here knows what a line extension allowance is. I learned a lot in the last 24 hours, I can tell you that. So line extension allowances, basically what that does is when a new house is to go in, a new development, et cetera, and you're going to extend that infrastructure, you're going to extend the gas line, you're going to extend the power lines, et cetera. Those costs typically are absorbed by the utility and then spread out across the entire system. So for example, again, you have a development, you got to extend the gas line out, they're going to put the gas line in, and that cost is spread out amongst everybody. And so when a developer, though, is tasked with doing a new development, it's an economic process. That process really determines affordability. We talk a lot about affordability in this chamber. We talk about affordability in this bill. We talk about affordability in a lot of other bills. We talk about affordability, particularly in housing, and how this relates to affordable housing. So for decades, the PSC has allowed LEAs to exist with our utility companies, both power and natural gas. Now the PSC, though, interestingly, back in June of 2025, had staff develop regs that would disallow the LEAs for natural gas. And so you may ask, okay, so what's the problem with that? So we got an example here. This is from Columbia Gas of Maryland. Those who aren't familiar with Columbia Gas, that's the gas company that serves the western part of the state. The third, probably largest gas utility in our state behind PG&E and Washington Gas. So, and I quote, eliminating this long-standing approach significantly impacts energy choice, housing affordability, and local economic development across the state. At a time when affordability is a top concern for Maryland families, this regulation intentionally creates barriers, making basic energy access more costly and less attainable. There was a development in District 2, a housing development they ran an analysis on. 72 new homes, $700,000 is what the developer would have to occur on this with this regulation. And what happens when these things happen like this is that development no longer occurs, especially in our part of the state where we'll go to our neighboring states. We're 5 or 10 miles from either side. We understand that. But furthermore, it's not just in the western part of the state. This will happen and occur in each and everyone's district here in this chamber. Mr. President, in Baltimore City, there's a lot of development that wants to be done in a lot of different areas of the city. And if this gas line, if BG&E can't extend these lines and have that cost spread out, it's going to make the project's cost prohibitive, and the reality is they won't happen. Prince George's County, Montgomery County, the same thing. As we try to create more housing and we don't allow these extensions to exist, those housing developments aren't going to happen. Here's the real kicker. We still allow that for the power companies, but we don't allow that for the gas company. There was a lot of talk this morning by the floor leader, and I appreciated how gas should be looked at. We need to take in all, everything needs to be on the table. And when we create regulations like this, that takes gas off the table. We're looking at long-term nuclear, but gas has to be in that short-term and mid-term conversation. And we allow the PSC to make regulations like this. All that's going to do is hinder our development efforts and hinder our affordability. So with that, Mr. President, I look for a favorable. Hope it's a friendly amendment there, Mr. Floor Leader. But thank you.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Recognize the floor leader.
Yeah, this topic was a subject of a PSC proceeding order, and I think the PSC order may have created some problems. So I think this amendment, Mr. President, actually corrects a problem that was created maybe, I believe, in the PSC. I should note, we didn't have a bill hearing on this subject, but that said, we'll consider this a friendly amendment, Mr. President.
All right. Any objections? Any objections? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments? Recognize Senator from the 27th District has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Thank you so much.
Give us just a moment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this amendment under the net energy metering program, in this bill as amended by the committee, the PSC may establish the new tariffs for Pacific solar market segments. This amendment is rather technical and simply directs the PSC to consider commercial and industry rooftops within the commercial solar as its own market segment for the PSC to consider. I move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Check with the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We consider this a friendly amendment. Thank you.
All right, friendly amendment. Any objections from the floor? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Further amendments to the bill or its title. Recognize Senator from the 42nd District has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment.
Yeah. Let's keep the roll going. Thank you, Mr. President. The body, I hope, will
Senator,
remember.
give us just one quick moment. Make sure we have everything.
Sure.
All right, Senator may explain.
Okay. I hope the body remembers the conversation I had with the senator from Howard and Montgomery counties about 3 hours ago. No, not quite that long ago. Quite a while ago. We were talking about the importance of encouraging large users of electricity to generate their electricity themselves and not to have to draw down electricity from the system. And we were talking about the provisions in the existing bill to still charge those people, those organizations, fees, alternative compliance fees. And I asked why we were continuing to require them to pay alternate compliance fees when they're doing what we want them to do, which is generate their own electricity. The more megawatts they generate themselves, the fewer megawatts they will be drawing down off of the grid, and the more megawatts will be available on the grid for our other users, our residents and our other businesses. So as a result of that conversation, I quickly had this amendment prepared. This amendment merely eliminates the alternate compliance fee for those organizations that are generating their own electricity, eliminates the fee entirely. That's what the amendment does. I request a roll call vote on it and urge a favorable vote.
Senators move the amendment. Recognize the floor leader.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to yield to the senator from District 9 who had some legislation on this very topic.
All right, I recognize Senator from District 9.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is once again is the senator from Cecil County's amendment, and the amendment as it passed the House was as the committee is a compromise that ensures we aren't unfairly burdening behind the meter generation while ensuring that we take into consideration, the health and environmental impacts of this type of generation. To clarify in the previous comments, large loads that bring their own capacity only have to pay the RGGI ACPs and only 10% of the BEPS ACP. And so I would urge the committee to reject this amendment. There also is currently a study going on with respect to the entire affordability of the building energy performance standards, and that study should be due in December of 2026. So I urge the body to reject this amendment.
All right, on the amendment, further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 29 votes to the negative, Senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments to the bill, or to recognize the minority leader has another amendment? Pages will collect and distribute the Senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just in the in trying to offer a number of different amendments on why numbers think that utility bills are higher than they need to be. Sometimes, again, it is a matter of the policies that we have created and what it forces either the Public Service Commission or the public utility companies to do based on, sometimes our ideas and things that we've talked about here in this chamber. For those that were around, in 2022, we passed the Climate Solutions Now Act. And in that bill, it barred school districts from entering into any contracts to buy non-zero emission buses starting in 2025. Okay, so we again made a policy decision that stated that school districts must now buy zero emission buses. Okay, but what did that do? In a sense of also doing that, it required the public utility companies to enter and to agree upon pilot programs on how this is going to work. So it's not just the contracts of the school districts, but also the contracts in the policy in getting these schools ready and available for the infrastructure that take place to power and to charge these buses. And in doing so, when we create these policies, ask the Public Service Commission to do something, then by doing that, it allows these public utility it allows the I'm saying something I remember very fondly during that debate. It allows these public utility companies to then rate base these charges. Okay, and that's what the debate we had, at that time was, is this something that we really want the public utility companies to do? To go forward with electric school bus infrastructure programs, developing that and back charging and charging that back to the ratepayers. So just last month, one of our public utility companies did submit to the to the PSC their proposal for this electric school bus pilot program. And through the Climate Solutions Now Act, it did allow up to $50 million per year per utility to do this program, to go forward with this. So that's $200 million statewide to go forward with a electric bus school program. So here's why I'm offering the amendment to essentially repeal that language from what was the Climate Solutions Now Act, but repeal that language and say, we no longer want to go forward with having public utility companies go through this electric school bus pilot program. And again, they haven't done it yet. So, okay, so it's just a proposal in. We're not going back on them and saying, hey, we've made a legislative or policy decision not to move forward. They haven't gone forward with this. They've submitted the proposal. It's at the PSC to take a look at. Why is this important? Okay, well, I think we're at the position now where this mandate doesn't align with available technology. And that was proven to us by, I won't name the county, but the largest school district in our state in 2021 contracted to buy 326 electric school buses. 326 electric school buses. Just a month ago, there was an article that now says this same county has just contracted to buy 140 diesel-powered school buses. Okay, so they went from electric buses that they were mandated to purchase. Now there was a waiver that we did put in the Climate Solutions Now Act. They did act on that waiver and subsequently went forward to purchase or seeking a proposal for 140 diesel buses, because the technology again is not there. It is not allowing the school systems to go forward with this, because of the way the time frame to manufacture, the maintenance costs, the ability to not perform the way they need to in cold weather conditions. It just didn't work, and this county made the decision, we need new buses, we have to move forward with something, and they went to diesel-powered buses. So that's telling us, the real world situation, that's telling us that this policy doesn't work. And if this policy can cost $200 million a year, I think it'd be a good position for this legislature to take and say, let's not move forward with this anymore. Maybe the time is not right for it. We don't need to allow public utility companies to go forward, build out this infrastructure, build the things that they need to in this pilot program, rate base it, increase cost for our constituents. But let's just not move forward let's take the market signals that this doesn't work. And with that, Mr. President, I would urge the body to approve the amendment to repeal the electric school bus pilot program.
All right. Senator has moved the amendment. Let's check with the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the minority leader referenced my own county, I think, in there. And the reason that they had to go get diesel school buses is because of the tariffs and the supply constraints on what's happening. There are no electric buses being built, largely because of the tariffs and some of the federal policies, and so therefore, out of necessity, the county went to purchase some diesel school buses. The reality is, this gets rid of the whole program. We're talking about our children, by the way, and so I guess the policy call here is, if you want to get rid of a program that is at heart about making sure that our school kids are not breathing in fumes from diesel fuel school buses, then that's one way of looking at it. I would suggest that the pilot program, when some of the constraints in terms of supply, et cetera, changes, hopefully over the next period of time, this program would still be worth keeping alive. This pretty much kills that program. And again, it's about the children, Mr. President, and smoking and breathing fumes, et cetera. So I would urge the body to resist this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, recognize the senator from the 37th District.
I'll just be real quick to speak on behalf of the amendment. This program is a big problem for all of my superintendents. It has been a routine problem. And I strongly support the amendment. And it is actually a problem for many school districts. It may not be for all, but it actually creates a big problem for some of our school districts. This is a very serious amendment. The program has created a lot of problems, and I strongly support the amendment. I hope members will vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, recognize the maker of the amendment.
Thank you very much, President. Just to keep in mind that the county that did contract to purchase these buses did so in 2021. I'm not sure if the suggested tariffs were in place at that time, but they could not get these buses delivered. And then the ones that did get delivered, again, maintenance charges were through the roof. They were not holding their charges. The technologies just simply wasn't there. So whether it's for the children or not, again, I'll remind everyone that the county just did purchase 140 diesel-powered school buses. So the county school board made that decision to say, you know what, we need school buses. And maybe diesel-powered exhaust is not going to be, or influence children as much as somebody might suggest it would be. But the fact of the matter is, this is a problem for all school districts. They now, any school bus that is purchased after 2025, when this went into effect, has to be electric power school buses. This is not working. And again, although the program is just a pilot program that we're seeing from the utility companies, this can come back. And to say that this kills the program forever, it kills it for now, but we'll meet again next year and the year after that and the year after that, and we can bring this back in place if we can. There's no need, and what the point of the amendment is, there's no need to have the utility companies progressing in the infrastructure and what they're trying to do with the pilot program unless the technology of the buses is available to them. And again, $200 million a year that they are authorized to be able to spend through the pilot program from the Climate Solutions Now Act. And again, I would ask for a roll call vote and again suggest that we can put this aside and let's make sure that we are doing something for our ratepayers. Thank you.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, to explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 28 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Recognize the minority whip has an amendment. Pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this amendment, one of the things we try to do is be responsive to our constituents. We've talked a lot about cost today, and one of the things that I don't know that there's any issue I've gotten more unsolicited, out of the blue emails, non-form emails about from people who've never contacted me before on an issue than energy choice. We passed SB 1 in 2024. There were some very important consumer protections and concerns in that bill, and I mean that sincerely. I think we all agreed that we didn't want predatory practices. We didn't want things where somebody's being pushed to sign up for something and then the cost goes through the roof later. All very well intentioned. However, what it's had the function of doing, which we did warn about, those of us that voted against the bill, is that we've lost energy choice in our state. Even some in-state guys like Constellation have basically, they've seen the impact where we're now, basically my constituents tell me they're frustrated because they feel they've been trapped into a monopoly. And I think probably some of you that have received email from constituents for that same complaint and argument. I believe competition and choice are key in helping to deal with price, with getting a better price. I know there's an argument that the consumer choice doesn't really mean that someone's going to be paying less. I've heard that argument. But I think whether that is even true or not, the idea that we need customer choice and opportunity for people to go and shop around is really important. So what my amendment does is to try to take a tailored approach to make sure we keep the reforms in place as best as possible. But what my amendment would do would define residential retail customer to clarify eligibility and prevent commercial accounts from being coded as residential. It would adjust supplier, it would basically adjust supplier pricing compared to standard offer service. It would maintain 12-month term cap for residential supply contracts, authorize consolidated billing, but without restoring the purchase of receivables or shifting credit risk to utilities, and refine the framework for pricing electricity. So essentially just trying to restore the ability for there to be residential retail consumer choice, but try to also make sure we keep those protections in place on the predatory side of things. I think as an amendment, our constituents would appreciate being able to have the opportunity again to have real choice and selection in their energy supplier, and it cannot hurt it can't possibly hurt the price to have more competition. So, Mr. President, I would move the amendment. Thank you.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Recognize the chair of the committee.
Yeah, I'll acknowledge this was a hot issue. We had work groups We've had some back and forth to try to nail this issue in terms of coming up with something that would bring back into the market. I don't know the implications of this particular amendment, what it means to the broader issue, but I'm going to yield. We did have, for the Senator from District 9 convened some work groups on this very issue with stakeholders, so she may, I shouldn't say she, the Senator from the 9th District may be able to address some of the issues in the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yield to the Senator from the 9th.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would say that this looks suspiciously like the bill is introduced by the senator from Anne Arundel County, and unfortunately, I've had several very good conversations with two major retail choice providers. They would not accept what is in here as a reason to come back onto the market. So what's in this amendment will cause absolutely no change, and I urge the body to reject this amendment.
All right. Any senators wish to speak on the amendment that have not yet spoken? If not, recognize the maker of the amendment.
Well, Mr. President, I'm going to ask for a roll call on this. This is about restoring energy choice for our consumers. And maybe some companies wouldn't still come back in. I don't know, but I think right now nobody's doing it. And I think it's a really common sense approach and rational approach. I thought it was, as I looked at the bill and wanting to present as an amendment, I thought it tried to strike the right balance. And if we're doing a Frankenstein energy bill, let's address this issue while we're at it. It could actually really help us on the affordability side. I'll put it this way. At the very least, it will help with the perception from our constituents that we're at least trying to give them as many options as possible. So I move the amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Yes, Senator from District 9.
Yes, what we heard in the work group is that this specific version of the bill would put $18 million more back on ratepayers to pay for the consolidated billing. In subsequent amendments, we were trying to negotiate a compromise whereby the retail providers would pay for the UCB. But unfortunately, this is going to cost our ratepayers $18 billion more. In addition, in the House bill, there's a 10% adder. Nobody is going to come on without more than a 10% adder. And colleagues, at this point in time, does anybody want a 10% adder on their SOS? I think not. I urge a rejection of this amendment.
All right. On the amendment, any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Mr. President, could I just ask the floor leader or my friend from Howard County to repeat whether that was billion or million?
I think the senator meant million. Million.
Okay. Well, that's okay. We just shot down amendments to save people like 50 million many times over. So that sounds like an estimate, and I'm not. That actually might be worth it to give people consumer choice. So $18 million is I don't know. I'm not in the work group, so maybe that's true. That sounds pretty small, negligible compared to all the billions of dollars we've been discussing on the floor today and amendments we've been trying to do. So I would still press the amendment, but I did want to clarify it was million and not billion. Thank you.
On the amendment, if there's no further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President?
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 26 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Another amendment, pages will collect and distribute the senator's amendment. Senator, explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this amendment really is about looking at the overall structure of what we're doing on grid management. And we've had a lot of very dense conversations today about ratepayer relief. Actually, earlier today, the Brattle report was quoted, a report that a study that they had done. This amendment really seeks to prioritize affordability through grid utilization, looking at how we utilize the grid. Grid utilization, for those of you that don't know, and I just learned recently about this a little bit myself, we've been talking a lot about this as it relates to the MPRP issue in my area about how do we use the current infrastructure rather than having to get more transmission. But also there's a whole philosophy and there's a whole movement to look at how we utilize the grid nationwide, the different grids nationwide, because it's been found that at any given hour, as much as half of our grid's capabilities are not being used, and And so it's really interesting that there's this, it's an emerging concept in utility regulation. And if we effectively utilize transmission and distribution infrastructure, we'd be able to save ratepayers money. This amendment would take important steps towards measuring existing grid utilization and assessing new transmission and distribution infrastructure. That's a big driver of cost increases to customers. If we can understand the utilization of the existing assets we have, Maryland can take a really good look at our grid investments and reduce unnecessary capital spending and lower long-term customer costs. So the Brattle report came out to say that if we just increased grid utilization by 10% in the country, just 10%, it would save ratepayers over $100 billion, they estimate. Billion, that is a billion with a B. But we have to have, but to do that, you have to have regulatory models that encourage utilities to pursue that opportunity. So, from this, one of the really interesting quotes I found about this from Ian Magruder, who's on Utilize Coalition. As I said, at any given moment, we're not using half of the grid and its capabilities. Grid utilization is one of the few near-term solutions that can reduce the cost of electricity at scale in short order. And so, Mr. President, I would just move this amendment. It's going to give us, I can itemize what it does here. It requires the PSC to adopt regulations and metrics to analyze utilization by January of 2027. Then give that guidance to utilities so they review so they can review their practices. And each utility will need to would need to submit updated plans every 3 years about how they're going to maximize the grid. So, Mr. President, it's really just I view it as a technical amendment, a reporting amendment. I would move the amendment and ask for the body support.
All right, Senators move the amendment. Let's check with the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee considers this a friendly amendment.
All right, look at that. Any objections? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 841 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to the next calendar, which is report number 30. Clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 1532, the Speaker, Utility Relief Reducing Energy Load Inflation for Every Family Act, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right, I recognize the Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill, as amended, is an exact same format as the bill we just heard, Senate Bill 841. And with that, I'd move the adoption of the 2 amendments in the committee report.
All right, floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Recognize Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to recognize that the House bill can be amended on third reader, a number of amendments passed today.
Certainly.
Would it be appropriate to just let this go into third reader then?
I think that makes the most sense, and we'll probably take this up on Monday, so we'll have time through the weekend for both.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate the clarification.
In order to conform. So questions on the 2 amendments, any objections? Without objection, the 2 amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Without objection, the amended report is adopted. We will have amendments for third reader, but at the moment, we'll order it passed for third reading. All right, let's do, we have a concurrence. Ready for a concurrence? Let's take that up.
Senate Bill 283, the President Maryland Consolidated Capital Bond Loan of 2026, motion to concur with the House amendments.
Recognizing the Chair of the Capital Budget Subcommittee.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, as you know, the Senate passed the capital budget, losing track of days, last week, and the House took it up recently. I would just like to say that all the Senate priorities were protected in the House. Any changes were at the request of senators that were sent over to the House of Delegates. There were some add-ons to projects based on senators' request where we were able to add some additional money for projects. But other than that, there's been no modifications. I think we all could be proud of this project that invests billions of dollars indirectly and directly into Maryland's economy. It creates and maintains tens of thousands of jobs and ultimately reflects our priorities that can be felt throughout the state of Maryland. So with that, we motion to concur with the House amendments.
All right, the committee moves to concur with the House amendments. Any objection to the amendments? Without objection, the concurrence amendments are adopted. Senate Bill 283 is now again before the Senate on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote. Madam Clerk, if we could ring the bells. Explain their vote. Sorry, I should have. All right. The clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 283, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, that does it. The desk is as clear as it is going to get. So we are going to pause there. Let's go ahead and see what the afternoon holds. It looks like some of the House committees have already met, and it sounds like staff has been presenting a number of bills. So hopefully, we'll see. We'll try to. It's good. What's that? Some, not all. Well, some have been postponed until 2:30, so we'll see. I think some committees were meeting, others were not. So I recognize the Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. By the way, my 1:30 didn't go very well because I wasn't there, so they started really early, Ways and Means. Anyway, the Senate Finance will meet at 3 o'clock for a voting session. I think we have about 30 bills to vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Triple E.
Thank you, Mr. President. Triple E will meet at 3 p.m. for some short number of bill hearings and then a voting session thereafter. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Budget and Tax.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will meet at 2:45 for hearings and voting.
All right, Commission Proceedings.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. President. We'll also meet at 2:45 for bill hearings. And also tomorrow we have a voting session at 9 a.m.
9 a.m. voting for JPR, 2:45 for bills. Let's see, any other standing committees? Select committees? Joint committees? Yes, delegations. Recognize the chair of the Montgomery County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Montgomery County colleagues, we were going to try to get together immediately after floor session, seeing how late the time has gotten. We will not be meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Anne Arundel County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Following Montgomery County's lead in the interest of time as well, we were going to meet today after floor. I think we'll push that off and try to meet tomorrow after floor instead, given just the timing. And I know some folks may need to get over to the House. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Veterans Caucus or executive nominations?
Thank you, Mr. President. Report number 7 contains the remainder.
Oh, I think we don't have those. We don't have that up yet. I think we're going to take it up tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, it's coming. I think it's coming. Yes, Prince George's County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Prince George's County delegation will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in the Neal Conference Room.
10 a.m. tomorrow. Howard County delegation.
Howard County delegation will meet immediately after floor session to sign some letters for 2 minutes.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. Baltimore County delegation. Nope.
Ethics.
Ethics. Yes, please.
Ethics is meeting at 3 p.m. In room 214 over in DLS.
All right. Any further announcements? Caucuses? Yes. Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think the Baltimore County delegation will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If there's a problem, let me know. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Any further announcements? Quick administrative note, important note, just received from Joy and Robin. Please, senators, if you have guests that you want to come to the floor, they have to be pre-approved. We have to have a list so that we know who is on the floor. They have to have permission. So please make sure to have offices contact ahead of time, because we can't just have open access on the floor. So just keep that in mind, please. All right. That is it. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, let's do a quorum call.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call With 43 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session, recognizing the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Friday, April 3rd at 11 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. See you all tomorrow. Have a wonderful afternoon and evening.